A man addresses a woman who was tied up in prison, Eloise Vaillant, Grand Duchess of the North, who was reserved but deeply devoted. The man asks if she really killed Roseanne. No one could have guessed that the suspect who killed Saint Roseanne was none other than Eloise. He asks if she can give any reason and whether she committed treason of her own free will. The Duchess smiled and told him not to make her laugh, and then said that the church had revealed the whole truth and she didn't understand why he was wasting his time on her. Eloise claims His Majesty knows full well what kind of person she is, and then declares that she will not make up pathetic excuses. As usual, she remained calm, even in the face of death. The Emperor says that this is all for today and orders the guards to keep an eye on the traitor. Hearing this, the woman turns to him and asks him to execute her right now, since living in this dungeon is a humiliating death, and therefore she would prefer to die at his hands. His Majesty, Cayenne, surprised asks if this is truly her wish. Then he says that since she insists it will be so, and he will fulfill her wish. The Lord drew his sword, and then with one swing, plunged the girl into eternal sleep. As the red liquid left her body, Eloise grew cold, and her red gaze remained fixed on the eyes of the Cayenne Emperor until the very end. The main character reads on her smartphone that this is the end of Season 2, and will be continued in Season 3. After reading this, she cries out and asks if Eloise wasn't supposed to be the main character. The girl understood that she was the reason she bought all the episodes, and couldn't understand why they were just killing her off. She pondered how life is fiction, and that everything is just one fucking disappointment. The main character, Kim, is 22 years old. She grew up in a wealthy family, which allowed her to gain experience in a variety of sports and arts. The girl also studied ballet dancing, piano painting, kendo, horse riding, taekwondo, and much more. Of all of them, she loved kendo the most, because while practicing with a sword, she could let go of all her worries and simply be happy. And so it was, until one day. The main character asks in surprise how she is supposed to stop because she doesn't understand what kendo has to do with her entering high school. Her father insists that she now needs to concentrate on her studies, and her mother says that they only sent her to kendo to keep her in shape. The woman explains that she and her father want their daughter to become a teacher and believes that she will make a great wife in the future, and they are saying this only for her own good, and therefore are waiting for an answer. The girl agreed because she worked to become a teacher, as her parents wanted, until one day she realized something. Not once in her entire life had she been herself. Kim reflected on the fact that she was a puppet under the control of her parents, and nothing more than a doll moving according to their will, and reading novels became the only way for her to let off steam. The girl looked at her smartphone with delight and realized that the third season was starting today. Immersing herself in a world of characters who forged their own paths allowed her to escape from life, if only for a short while. Kim was crossing the road, immersed in a novella, wondering how shocking this season would be, but suddenly she saw a bright light. The main character doesn't understand why her head is splitting and why her whole body aches. However, she wonders when she even fell asleep, because yesterday she was walking home and waiting for the green light at an intersection, and then she remembers she was in an accident. The girl stared in amazement, unable to comprehend where she was. However, she thought it looked like some kind of palace, something she'd never seen before. The young lady does not understand what is happening, and she began to wonder if she was sleeping now, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw her face and she had red eyes. The maid turns to Her Highness and asks if she's feeling better. She then explains that she was worried because her mistress drank a lot of wine yesterday, and when she drinks like that, she can't help but think of the Duke of Viana. Hearing this, the main character was surprised because she knows that she prefers soju and beer, and then she was surprised because she spoke about the Duke of Wyan. The maid says that who would have thought that their Lady Eloise would grow up to be such a connoisseur of wine, and believes that the title of Grand Duchess has proven to be quite a heavy burden. Hearing this, the lady says that all this is impossible, and at that time, she realized that she was hit by a magic truck and transported to the world of the novel, and she became interested in how shocking the third season would be. The girl realizes that, moreover, if she is now the Grand Duchess of Viana, then the novella she finds herself in is called The Crown of Red Liquid, and this novella is currently the most popular on social media and forums. Viana was especially popular due to her self-confidence and beauty. The maid asks Her Highness what's wrong. At this point, the protagonist wonders if this girl must be her maid Anna. The lady says that everything is fine because she just feels a little tired, and at this time does not understand why she became the Grand Duchess of the North Eloise and why exactly her. The main character realizes that all she knows is teaching and doesn't understand what to do in a romantic fantasy. Then she tells Anna that she feels she needs to rest more because she's not feeling well. The maid wishes her a pleasant rest and says that if she needs her, she can call at any time. When the girl was left alone, she realized that she was now Eloise and was the one who did not hesitate for a second when her father, Duke Wyan, suddenly disappeared and easily defeated the demonic creatures of the North, thereby earning the title of Grand Duchess at a young age. The novella Crown of Red Liquid still hasn't decided on a leading female character. Perhaps that's why those who supported the Holy Rosanna protagonist and those who supported the Grand Duchess of Vienna often engaged in heated debates. The main character thought that it was so good that she was rooting for Eloise's team with all her might, but she understands that this does not mean that she wanted to be her, since she knows that the Duchess will die at the end of the second season, and what's worse, she will be brutally finished off by the main male character. None of the readers expected Eloise to turn out to be a villain, that is until the last chapter of the second season came out. Kyan's ally, Roseanne, was kidnapped and executed by a conspirator. To find the culprit, the Emperor combed through all the records of the incident, leading to a major revelation. Eloise was behind everything, despite being one of Kyan's allies in the struggle for the throne. The novella forums exploded in shock. When Kyan learned that Eloise, a person he trusted, was a conspirator, he hid his disappointment and doubted her betrayal. But instead of agreeing to Kyan's interrogation, Eloise began a rebellion. As befits an adult novel with depressive overtones, she was tortured until Roseanne was resurrected and eventually finished off. The main character realizes she was shot down the day the third season aired, and so she has no idea what will happen next. But she understands that Roseanne is definitely the main female character, and she's likely building a romantic relationship with Kane right now, even as they speak. The lady looks in the mirror and says that if they continue with her situation now, she understands that she is up to her ears in shit. The young lady doesn't understand why she feels cold, and at that moment, she realized that there was a robber behind her, and she quickly reacted by bending down, and then made a sharp turn and attacked the robber. Eloise realizes that her body was simply moving on its own, and she wasn't scared at all. Or rather, she even calmed down, and then attacked the man and finished him off. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a question about coming in for a bit. The girl thought that if she didn't act like Eloise, they would start to suspect her, and then asked her to come in. The Duchess looked at the man and thought that he had a scar, and it must be her assistant Drayden, because he knows her entire daily routine, and therefore she thinks that she should stick to him. The assistant thinks that it looks like Her Highness was expected, but she says that this is true and will leave the cleaning to him. He says that he will handle it quickly. The man looked at the robber and thought that the body wasn't bleeding much, so he figured the cleanup wouldn't take long. Meanwhile, the main character couldn't understand how he remained so calm while looking at the corpse. The girl became curious about whether she could survive here, since she understood that every day carried some kind of danger. A few hours later, Drayden approaches Her Highness and informs her that he has already returned. The lady asks what he did with the body. The man replied that he had left it at the border, as always. Hearing this, she thought about the demonic creatures that lived there, and she wondered if dealing with demonic creatures wasn't one of the Grand Duchess's duties, and she realized she would have to kill demons. Eloise reflects on how she's learned something from today's ambush, and that her body is fine, but she's moving instinctively. However, she understands that controlling her psyche is quite difficult. The main character says that this is a good job, and at that time, she thought that she should be calmer, because she cannot make rash decisions, because this body belongs to the Duchess herself, and as she understands, her life is constantly under threat. Drayden asks what the plan is for today, and reports that Johann requested an audience and wanted to discuss the knighting process. The lady says that she will take care of these things right now. He says that she is on duty at the border post today and suggests stopping by on the way. Hearing this, the lady was surprised, and he asked if she was not happy because she thought this was a good opportunity to practice. Eloise thought that she could get rid of the killer, so there shouldn't be any problems with a couple of demons, since she believes that it is not the strongest or the smartest who survives, but the one who adapts best to change. A year later, the main character thought that the first year had flown by unnoticed, and she had fit into her role quite well, and thought that, surprisingly, being Eloise wasn't so bad, although it was still dangerous. The Duchess understands that she has a wonderful status in society, and no one will even think of interfering in her affairs, and believes that her freedom will never be taken away again. The girl understands that it is, however, quite ironic to realize that her life has acquired more meaning compared to the past. By overcoming obstacles, Eloise begins to understand the meaning of her actions. Dryden turns to her ladyship and asks what she is thinking about, and offers to take a look at it, and then asks if this rabbit is not cute. The lady thought that he might look menacing, but he was actually a kind fellow. Then she told the guy that he could crush him. The assistant screamed, asking how anyone could say such terrible things. At this point, the main character thought that no matter what anyone said, Dryden really was very sweet. Even though he was tearing demons apart, Eloise didn't waste time and constantly learned about what had happened earlier in this world, because the whole point is that she is the main character, and her novel is divided into 3 seasons. The first season, in which after the assassination of the emperor, the storyline unfolds of the 15-year-old crown prince of Cayenne, who escaped from the palace. The season ends with the return of the heir to the throne and his corresponding rights after 5 years. In the second season, when Cayenne turns 20, he ascends to the throne thanks to the help of Eloise and Roseanne. Roseanne's murder. After this climax, the Duchess is subjected to all manner of torture and ultimately executed. The third season aired on the day she was hit by the magical truck, so the main character didn't know the rest of the story. However, she realizes that the prince is now 15, and accordingly, the first season begins with the news of his disappearance. In other words, in order to survive in this merciless struggle for the throne, as the main villain, it is necessary not to interfere in political affairs and not to get involved with Cayenne. The assistant asks Her Highness whether he should call this rabbit Toto or Kiki. Meanwhile, she was thinking about how she would definitely be locked within the confines of an isolated server, and on top of that, she couldn't help Cayenne in any way during his takeover. The young lady understands that the most important thing is that she must live in the present and not in the future. Night Guard Commander Johann said a letter had arrived from the palace. Meanwhile, she thought they were finally beginning the novella. It was a warning of the emperor's death and the disappearance of the crown prince, the sole heir to the imperial throne. The young lady understood that approaching the palace was forbidden, as any mistake could cost her life. Suddenly, the rabbit escapes, and the girl hopes the prince will also manage to escape, but she wonders if he'll find a place to hide. However, she knows she shouldn't worry because he's the main character, and there's no point in thinking about the worst. The Duchess asks Johann who sent the letter. He replies that it was someone from the palace, and fears he won't survive the night with such wounds. After all, he was attacked by a dangerous demon. The lady says it's terrible, but she thinks no one will have proof she received the letter. She then declares that from now on, this information is confidential, and the letter must be burned. The lady says that they have never received such notifications, and asks if he understood her words. Eloise realized that the time had come to act, and then tells the captain of the knights that her goal is simple and she wants freedom, and from now on, she is her own mistress, and no one will dare to control her. The Duchess tells him to lock the northern gate, and then declares that no one will leave this place without her permission. She reflects on her destiny, the true path she is destined for, and vows to protect her promise to her last breath. A week has passed since the northern gates closed, and the crown prince went missing, and the young lady began to enjoy every training session. The assistant informs her ladyship that this was the last one. Meanwhile, the main character began to think that he had a genuine split personality. Assistant Dryden, despite his intimidating appearance and tall stature, adores small cute animals, but she hasn't gotten used to it for a year. The Duchess understands that on the other hand, one cannot judge everyone only by their appearance, but she wonders how many people thought the same about him. The knight tells Dryden that she looks at him as if he's sick. Hearing this, the boy, surprised, asks Her Grace if she truly thinks that of him. Eloise says they've killed enough demons, so there'll be a temporary lull, and she thinks she should head back. Her assistant reminds her that she still hasn't answered him. Johann informs the lady that the demons have been acting strangely lately. She agrees and says he's right, as the number of demons seeking to cross the border is increasing each time. She then asks if he could engage in reconnaissance. The main character doesn't understand what it is and thinks it's an ominous omen, and she understands that after becoming Eloise, her instincts have never failed her. The girl thinks that the wind is much colder than usual today, and then says that she will go first and offers to clean there. Dryden, surprised, asks if she'll go without them, and also inquires if something has happened. The lady replies that an uninvited guest has simply decided to visit. The young lady reads the book and enthusiastically says that she actually did it in one day. The Grand Duchess of the North always had a lot of responsibilities, and looking at her work log, it becomes clear just how responsible she is. When the North falls, the empire will be destroyed, and it was written there so as not to forget that the dawn of the end marks the sunset of her life. The lady understands that failure to do her job will result in her death. In the original novel, there was a way to kill all the demons on the border with one swing of the sword, but this required the rise of a new emperor. The main character understands that she will have to wait 5 years, but she believes that the riper the fruit, the sweeter it is. After all, she will have much less work once the demons disappear, and ultimately, she believes that her life will flow peacefully as usual. Eloise is thinking that she needs to return to the present because the demons are definitely multiplying now, and it is quite possible that something is already happening on her territory. The maid asks her ladyship what she is thinking about, and then says that letters continue to arrive from the capital, and she does not understand what to do with them all. At this time, the lady thought that they were all waiting for her help in one way or another in finding the missing crown prince, and then said that she had a simple answer. The Duchess reports that the North is busy fighting the Dominion, so the Grand Duchess is forced to refuse any direct assistance. The Crown Prince did not disappear. He decided to hide, which created a lot of problems with finding him, and the main character understands that he is 15 years old, but he made a very cunning move. The lady understands that it doesn't matter who he is, and if it weren't for his escape, the prince would have been finished off anyway, and then tells Anna that she can go. The girl looked at her hands and felt pain at the end of her finger, and she became uninterested in whether something had happened to the boundary stone. The boundary stone isn't just a rock separating their lands, but also a magical barrier against evil demons, created primarily from Eloise's red human fluid. Therefore, she's certain that this pain is directly related to this stone. The mistress turns to the maid and tells her to prepare her things, as she needs to check something. Anna, surprised, asks if anyone is there. The lady looks at the stone and says it's just as she thought. It's a smooth cut, and someone used a sword to destroy the stone and cross the border. The maid tells her ladyship that, in other words, they really do have an uninvited guest, and therefore thinks that it would be advisable for her to leave this matter for now and take a rest. The lady says that everything is fine, and she will find their traveler faster than the knights get here. Eloise saw a wounded boy sitting under a tree. Anna, surprised, asks how he managed to get into the forest, and the lady says he must be the one who tried to destroy the boundary stone. However, she thinks it's too dark to see him, as he looks like a nice young man, perhaps 15 years old. Then the main character realizes he's the one everyone's been looking for, and she's shocked. The maid asks her ladyship what happened, because the mistress is behaving very strangely. At this time, the main character thought about how her whole wonderful plan had simply collapsed, and then said that she thought that everything was going so smoothly, but what she now sees is a completely ordinary plot twist for a seasoned reader of science fiction novels. Eloise understands that of all the places where he could hide for 5 years, of all the places in such a vast empire, he chose the North, but she wonders what the Crown Prince is doing here. The woman kneels and addresses His Royal Highness, and at that moment, she thought that such a scene was not in the original novella, and it turns out that all these years he was hiding in the North on the territory of the villain. The Duchess wondered how he'd managed to reach the border forest. Suddenly, the boy grabbed the lady's hand, and she said, surprised, that he was feverish, and at that moment, she thought his body felt like it was on fire. The Crown Prince says he found her, and then collapses. The woman reports that his clothes are covered in red liquid, and the maid, surprised, asks if everything is all right. At this time, the main character thought that right now they had 2 choices, and the first was that she would leave the Crown Prince and return to the palace only with Anna. The second time, she returns to the palace with the Crown Prince, the protagonist of this novella. However, she realizes that she prefers the first option, but there's still a high risk of running into a night patrol, which would become a huge problem. Eloise understands that, especially since her blonde hair is a sign of belonging to the royal family, if the news of the prince's presence in the northern part of the kingdom falls into the hands of Duke Elysian, she believes that she will not be able to avoid meeting the royal family. The Duchess does not understand why this happened to her, but she believes that the situation must be assessed objectively and that only one outcome is possible. The lady turns to Anna and tells her to bring blankets, because the Crown Prince needs to be covered, and then says that they will return to the palace together. The lady says the wound isn't deep and believes the red liquid on her clothes belongs to someone else, and all the while she wonders who would have thought she'd bring it into the protagonist's chambers with her own hands. The girl believes that this should never have happened, and believes that she still has time to end her life. The maid tells her mistress not to worry, as everything she saw will remain secret. Her Majesty says she trusts her, and she can go. The main character looked at the prince and thought that he looked so beautiful, even in such a deplorable state, and she realized that she had never met anyone more beautiful. Eloise thinks that there is no time to think about his appearance, but she thinks that Elyon would be very useful. Elyon is Eloise's only older brother. According to the novel, he currently serves in the Holy Knight's Guard and is unlikely to come north while there's chaos and confusion surrounding the throne, especially since the emperor was recently killed. The young lady believes that even if Elyon is fired, for some reason, the possibility of his arrival in the north will also be zero. Suddenly, the guy came to his senses, and the main character turns to His Royal Highness and asks if she woke him up. The crown prince, surprised, asks who she is. The lady explains that she found him in the forest, and he called her by name and asks if he doesn't remember. He replies that he doesn't. The main character asks if His Royal Majesty remembers anything. The boy, surprised, asks why she addresses him like that. The woman asks what he saw last. The young man says he thinks he was wandering through the forest until he saw a purple miner. Hearing this, the Duchess thought he was probably referring to the boundary stone. The prince explained that he thought it was blocking the way, and so the only way out of the situation was to destroy it, and he had a sword at hand. Eloise asks if he remembers what happened before arriving in the forest. He replies that he doesn't remember anything, and she asks, surprised, "What about the palace?" Kyan, surprised, asks what palace she's talking about. At this point, the lady wonders if he's truly lost his memories. Then she says it can't be. The girl realizes the male lead doesn't remember a thing and thinks it's a lousy situation. Meanwhile, he looks at the lady and thinks something's wrong. The prince asks if they've treated his wound. The lady explains that his clothes were soaked in red liquid, so they decided to treat the wound, and she apologizes. The gentleman suggests not to worry, as he is very grateful for the help, and then says that he would actually like to take a bath. Eloise says that she will do it right now, and at that time, she thought that maybe after the bath, at least some of his memories will return to him, since she believes that it cannot be that he lost his memory so easily. The young gentleman asks her name, and the lady replies that she is Eloise Viana. He repeats her name, and the lady doesn't understand why he addresses her informally when he has no memories. The fact that she was already considering this confirms his behavior, which is present to the proud prince. The lady wondered if he'd truly lost his memory, or if he was just testing her. The young man informed her that from now on he would only obey her. Hearing this, the girl thought it was quite unexpected. The prince says that from now on, he will follow all her instructions. Hearing this, the protagonist finds it a bit unexpected, then wishes him a good rest and leaves. The Duchess thought that what had just happened had surprised her more than the murder of the stranger on the first day after her arrival, and she believed that step by step this character would in any case come to the fore. But the only question was what impact her actions would have on the story. The main character realizes that it was she who brought him into the house, which is why the plot has changed, and if the consequences cannot be avoided, then wouldn't it be better to improve the relationship with the crown prince? The lady understands whether he has lost his memory or not. One thing remains unchanged. He called her by name and therefore understands with whom he is talking. Eloise considers that while the prince is young, she should take advantage of this opportunity to gain his trust so she won't be executed later. After all, befriending him isn't all that difficult. The Duchess thought that she would then hide it here, since she believed that this was the most profitable option, since all that remained was to put everything in its place. The North refused to participate in the search for the crown prince, and it is quite logical to assume that there will be people who want to damage her reputation. Accepted by society, but alienated by the rest of the world, the Grand Duchess saves the crown prince from certain death and returns the throne to the true heir. The young lady believes that her help will also be rewarded, and she has decided that if she cannot finish off the prince with her own hands, she will have to make him emperor. The main character asks the guy how the water is, and then says that they will deal with the medicine after dinner, and then asks if he still didn't remember anything. The young man reports that he tried to think about what happened, but everything seemed to be in a fog, and at that time, the lady thought that this was very suspicious, but the truth would soon be revealed. The Duchess asks if his name is Kayaninen Helisis. He suggests calling him Cayenne. Meanwhile, the lady thought about how her life was now completely in his control. Eloise thought that she would raise a wonderful emperor and then find him a suitable heroine, and this would be a wonderful ending to the story, and as a reward, she would take measures to destroy the demons with one swing of the sword. The prince asks if something is wrong with his face. She tells him to never forget his origins. After all, he is the crown prince of their kingdom. The main character thought that after the medication, he must have fallen asleep, and she began to wonder what she was thinking about. Dryden asks if she's checking to see if he's asleep. The lady explains that she's monitoring his breathing, as after all these expeditions, the prince is clearly exhausted. The lady suggests that he stay here for the next 3 days, and then it will be necessary to decide what to do with him, and then asks the assistant if he understood the meaning of her words. Drayden says he needs to find a potion to hide his true hair color. Medical products made from northern wounds can change hair or eye color. The recipe and existence of these potions are known to a select few, so they can only be used for their intended purpose. The lady says that fortunately, she knows right now who possesses the recipe, and it's definitely her. The reason her family developed the recipe for this potion is quite simple. All members of the family are renowned for their black hair and red eyes, and in the event of an enemy invasion, the Duchess or Duke, finding themselves in danger, would recruit third parties who would take the potion and pretend to be the masters of the house in their stead. The man asks Her Highness in surprise if she doesn't think it might not work on members of the royal family, and the lady asserts that it might still be worth trying. Drayden asks if she has a plan, and also asks what if everything goes wrong. Eloise looked at the prince, curious how much he'd heard since he was awake. The young gentleman asked what they were doing here. The assistant turns to His Royal Majesty and explains that they just wanted to make sure he was okay, and then asks if he needs help. At this time, the main character thought that this was to be expected from a member of the royal family, because despite such a dose of medicine, he was able to wake up. The assistant reflects on how he never thought that he would one day be honored to see the crown prince so ruthless at such a young age, and at that moment, he realizes that something is wrong, since he is definitely not the type of person who can smile like that. Eloise realizes that he has lost his memory after all, and she wonders if he shouldn't act in accordance with his true nature. Drayden looked at the prince and did not understand what it was, because he was smiling so sweetly at the lady. Cayenne tells the lady that he had a terrible dream, and at that time, she thought that maybe his memory had returned. A young man reports that someone was following him, and the woman asks if he remembers what they looked like. The man explains that his faces were hard to make out, and that he thinks their hair was the same color as his. Elysian was among them, but she believes that it is unlikely that he would not have pursued him just for the sake of finishing him off, because the Duke is very cunning, so making a direct move despite the risks is not his style. The prince says he's scared and can't sleep, but the lady suggests he rest since she'll stay by his side. He asks if she'll sleep with him. The assistant was surprised to hear this and said he repeated it again. The guy said he wanted Eloise to sleep with him. The Duchess reflects on how she's never seen such an expression on Drayden's face, as he clearly looked at her. Cayenne insists that this is a very realistic dream, and that's why he's scared. The young lady informs His Highness that she is forced to refuse because she thinks that it would be better for him to offer such things to his future wife, and at that moment she began to wonder if she had refused him too harshly, since she thinks that this makes her feel awkward. The guy asks if she could stay with him until he falls asleep, and at this time, the main character does not understand how she can refuse him, but she realized that this could be her chance, and this is the best time to get closer to him, because she thinks that taking advantage of this situation is not such a bad idea. The Duchess agrees and says that she will stay with him, and then moves to sit next to him on the bed. Hearing this, the aide turns to Her Highness and informs her that he needed to discuss an important matter with the Duchess concerning her safety. She asks if they can discuss it later. The man says that he will then postpone greeting His Royal Highness and will wait for her in the drawing room, and then leaves. Cayenne asks the lady if the man is her assistant, and the lady informs him that his name is Drayden. The young gentleman thinks his loyalty seems boundless, and the lady insists that he can be relied upon. Cayenne on the throne anyway, as that was the only way to avoid her fateful death. The prince says that if this is so, then he offers to take his hand and asks if she can hold his hand while he sleeps. The main character looked at his palms and thought that he would definitely kill someone with these hands in the future. The girl touched his hand and promised that she would be with him until he fell asleep. At this time, Dryden is thinking that it is somehow strange because his gaze changed dramatically when he paid attention to him, and he feels that hiding something is not new to him, but deceiving her grace is such a big boy, and he cannot fall asleep without his mother. The assistant reflects on the fact that at such moments, there is a lack of Eloin sulfur. Eloise thought that it was as if she suddenly had a son, although if you think about it, their age difference is only 4 years, and she wonders if this is possible. The lady asks His Highness how he's feeling and how his wound is. He suggests calling him Kien, and the girl apologizes and then says she can't. The prince asks if she will call him Highness in front of other people. She realizes he's been right, as she believes he'll have to hide his origins in the future. The Duchess called his name, and the guy said that he was pleased to hear it. And at that time, the girl thought that she had never seen him smile like that, and therefore thought that her lot was not so bad. Eloise muses that it would be cool if he were such a tyrant, but she was a sweetheart. He would transform from a man who revered the main character into a respected figure who cared about the interests of his loyal subjects. The lady asks how his wound is, and he says that everything is fine because it doesn't hurt thanks to her efforts. At this time, the maid thought that something was definitely wrong because she did not understand how a person could be so two-faced. The prince says that she was not his, and then abruptly takes his hand back and says that only Eloise has the right to concern him. Anna thought about how her grace wanted to help the crown prince take the throne in the future, and she realized that at such moments she missed Sir Eloi here. The man says they haven't seen each other in a while. The main character comes out of the prince's room and says he's finally asleep, and she doesn't understand how he can have trouble sleeping at his age. Suddenly, the man grabs the protagonist's hand and says it's nice to see her. She asks surprised what Eloin is doing here. The young gentleman tells Ellie that he certainly understands that she is extremely happy to see him, and asks if she doesn't think she should be more careful with how she addresses her older brother. The girl asks in surprise why he is here. The eldest son of the missing former duke and commander of the Holy Knights defending the Holy Elohim, Vayana. Contrary to what one might expect from the head of the Holy Knights, he is a cold-blooded and cruel character. The fact that someone like him would suddenly decide to visit his sister in the north could only mean that he had an ulterior motive. Eloin asks why his little sister is so damn adorable, then tells him she's too shy for her own good. Then he says that's just as he thought, asking why she doesn't resign as Grand Duchess, since he thinks it's too much for someone so sweet and fragile. The girl claims that she will never do this, and at that time, she looked at her brother and does not understand how the cold-blooded Eloin can smile like that. After all, this is too different from the novel. The main character realizes that the prince who was supposed to be on the run has appeared in her castle, and now the seemingly cruel Eloin is actually a loving brother visiting his sister. She believes that if this continues, she won't be surprised if the missing earl suddenly reappears out of nowhere. The young gentleman asks if she's still confused by his appearance. The girl asks why he decided to visit the north so unexpectedly. Eloin explains that it is obvious that this is because he misses his one and only irreplaceable little sister, and therefore, first of all, he invites her to sit down and talk. The main character says that she didn't think that his work would allow him to make such an informal visit to them in the north. He says that her big brother might be offended if she treats him so coldly. Eloise explains that she wanted to understand if he was sure he could be here while they were without an emperor, and when she looked at the boy, she thought his reaction was rather suspicious and thought it might be better to tell him about the prince. The young gentleman asks how things have been in the palace lately, and then reports that despite the fact that the crown prince is still missing, they are coping mainly thanks to Duke Elysian. Hearing this, the Duchess does not understand why he leaves such pauses between sentences, and she wonders if Eloin knows more than he wants to show, and then asks if this means that he came to the north in search of the missing prince. The brother replies that of course not, and then asks if she thinks he might do anything that would directly endanger her, since he's heard that something strange has been happening in the forest lately. She says that's exactly it, since demonic beasts roam freely there and cross the border in ever-increasing numbers. Eloin is a northerner and lived there until he was 15 years old, and if he had not become a holy knight, he would have replaced the duke and simply put his brother knows much more about this place than she does. The young gentleman, surprised, asks if she sent a squad to scout the area. The lady replies that she didn't, wanting to avoid unnecessary casualties. Then she explains that he just tried to change the subject as she asked why he was there. The brother smiles and says it was so obvious, and the girl realizes he's definitely hiding something. He agrees with her and says she's right, because he's not here just to see her, and then reveals that he's been cut off from his service. Hearing this, the main character was surprised and asked what he meant, and at that time she thought that it was impossible for the holy knight who was protecting the most holy one to be cut off from service at such a difficult time, and believed that he probably meant that something else was cut off. Eloise claims he's a poor thing, and then says that even though he's a churchman, he doesn't understand how they could cut it off. The young gentleman tells her to be sure that his manhood is the only thing she doesn't need to worry about, and then asks how she even came to that conclusion. The lady asks if he's really been relieved of his duties as a knight. Her brother says it certainly is because that's why he came home to rest, and perhaps become a personal assistant. Then he asks her what she thinks. At this time, the main character thought that she would like him to leave, because her hands were already completely occupied with the crown prince. At this point, Drayden enters the room and addresses Her Highness, informing her that they have a problem. The young master asks if he means him by problem. The assistant objects, explaining that he meant the commander of the Holy Knights is on his way. Drayden, surprised, says he sees they've already met. Ellen asks what's wrong with an older brother visiting his younger sister, then points out that he's not even from a demonic creature, and wonders if he needs to be so tense. The Duchess says he wouldn't dare frighten her assistant. The gentleman asks how he could dare do such a thing to the Grand Duchess's personal assistant, then looks at him and thinks that this guy seems seriously interested in the position of his assistant. The main character explains that he acted only on her orders, and she told him to notify her first if he ever visited them. The brother asks in surprise why, and also asks if he would like to be sure that she will be the first one to meet him. The lady tells Drayden that her brother is staying at the castle temporarily and should therefore be sure to inform everyone of this. She suggests continuing the conversation tomorrow, as she still has much to discuss with him. Elowen asks his sister why she's looking at him like that, and she suggests they get straight to what he wanted to tell her yesterday. He asks surprised why exactly. The Duchess reminds that he said that he was removed from service, but there are not many people with the authority to do so, and of course there is Duke Elysian. The guy says that as he thought his sister is a genius, and the lady says that means he sent him into retirement to show her her place. Elowen says that he probably got on his nerves anyway, both as the Grand Duchess's older brother and as the commander of the knights, and that he most likely took preventative measures to prevent his influence on the church through the Holy Virgin. The girl asks if he has any desire to return to the knights. He thinks sister must be joking. The main character understands that her brother never wanted to be a holy knight, and he simply had no choice. And since he needed to learn to control his holy power, since no one in the house had such a gift, he was truly special. Elowen went to the capital, and due to the sudden disappearance of their father, Eloise had to succeed him and become Duchess. The young lady says that if she thinks about it, she thinks he should stay north for a while, because she has a bad feeling about what's going on. In the original, Elowen dies, which is expected since Eloise is also destined to die in the end. However, in reality, he had a chance to betray his sister and save himself. But in order to fulfill her will, he gladly sacrificed himself, and moreover, Elowen adored his sister so much that without his help, she most likely would never have been able to finish off the most holy one. The young lady is thinking that while she's thinking about it, someone needs to teach Kyan how to wield a sword, not to mention that Eloin knows much more about palace affairs than she does, so it would be much better to keep him to herself. The girl says that she is his little sister after all, and then asks if he thinks that she could do something that would put him in direct danger. Hearing this, the guy asks in surprise when his sister grew up so much, and she says that, to be honest, she also needs his help. Her brother asks if this means she's ready to appoint him as her personal assistant, Elowen Objects, and explains that she simply needs a fencing instructor for the crown prince. Hearing this, the guy says that he is her big brother, and would still prefer to be her assistant, and then surprised asks what she just said and which crown prince they are talking about. A few minutes later, Elowen greets his majesty, and at this time reflects on the fact that he would never have thought that he would be in the north, because he means that perhaps one day it could have occurred to him, but in any case, he made an excellent decision. Eloise's only remaining relative, and then bids him rise. At this time, the guy thought that the crown prince really had lost his memory, but he believed that this face could not be the face of a person who had lost his memory. Kyan asks you to take care of him. Meanwhile, the young gentleman thought about how he'd been looking at him, as if he wanted to kill him a second ago, but now he was smiling. He wondered who he was looking at, but realized it was his ally. The main character looked at her brother and thought that he didn't look particularly happy, and thought that it was expected since his sister had transferred the prince to her castle. The girl asks him how many of her knights he thinks will recognize the heir. Eowyn says he would say only Johann, since he always accompanied her on visits to the capital, and her incompetent assistant can do the same. Imperial law stipulates that the crown prince must not participate in any political or social activities until he finally reaches adulthood. Ellie says she's still considering telling Johann just in case, and the maid knows too. The main character thought about how far fewer people knew what the crown prince looked like than she thought, and that consoled her. And the guy said it sounded like she was planning to leave His Royal Highness here in the north. The Duchess believes that this is exactly the case, and she plans to keep him here for the entire 5 years, since directly helping the main character become emperor will increase her chances of survival. Ellie asks her brother if he remembers her saying, "The prince needs someone to teach him swordsmanship." Hearing this, the young master asks if she's serious, and then explains that he's asking if she's really planning what he thinks she's planning. The girl says that she plans to overthrow Duke Elysian, who may soon become the new emperor from the Duke, and support the crown prince in his ascension to the throne, and then says that all this will happen in the near future. At this time, the prince came to the door, and he was interested to listen to what they were discussing, and he heard the lady's last words, and then left. The main character asks her brother what he thinks about this, and she means the prince's amnesia, because she understands that anyone would think it's so strange that he lost all his memories like that at once. The guy says that this could be her chance, and he talks about a chance to get out of this fight for the throne. Although Eowyn omitted some details, she could immediately understand the meaning of his statement, because he was asking her to hand over Kyan and inform Duke Elysian and the imperial family of his location. Elysian is currently the most likely suspect in the emperor's assassination. If he learns of the prince's whereabouts, the chances of him killing him are about 99%. Eloise understands that it is of course too early to draw any conclusions, but she knows that she constantly needs to be on guard, because even from the TV series she watched, it is obvious that those behind such incidents are always members of the royal family who want to seize the throne. The girl thought that Kyan would not die like that because she needed him, and in the end, the prince was the only person who knew how to get rid of the demonic creatures of the north, and she knew that all this work in the north was too difficult. Ellie thinks that at this rate, she'll have to kill these creatures until she becomes an old woman, and then she says that under no circumstances, because if she gives up the crown prince, the Duke Elysian will arrange his death, and then that duke will definitely become emperor. The main character understands that as soon as he receives the crown, she asks him who he thinks he'll consider a threat to himself. Her brother says it's them. Ellie claims that the Duke will not rest until he receives the prince's dead body, and therefore their current situation could turn into a new opportunity for them, since he will be so busy searching for the crown prince that he will not want to waste time on them. The Duchess informs them that there is only one way to guarantee that they will all survive, because they must use any means necessary to ensure that Kyan ascends to the throne. The young lady understands that as long as she does not follow the plot of the novel and leaves the Holy One alone, then she and the Holy One will both reach a happy ending. The girl offers to raise the prince as well as they can here in the north and place him on the throne. Hearing this, the boy smiles and agrees, then says that if this is what she truly desires, he won't argue. Ellie says that at the moment, it is important for them to figure out whether His Royal Highness has actually lost his memory, and if this turns out to be true, then they need to help him regain his memories, and asks her brother if he knows anyone who could help them. Eowyn reports that there is one person on his mind, and he will try to find him. The main character came to visit the prince, and saw that he was sleeping, and she was glad that he was recovering quickly, but she was a little nervous that he wanted her to hold his hand every night before going to bed, and thought that she would raise him well because she could handle it. The young gentleman asks if His Royal Highness has finally fallen asleep. The lady thinks it might be because he's been through so much and keeps tossing and turning. Elian asks his sister how she is going to tell her knights about this, and thinks that it is probably time for him to tell her, since the expansion of northern influence is now critical. The young master believes that they can use the prince to strengthen their power. The main character says that she is thinking of using the prince to catch some rats, and then asks him how many spies from other houses are currently in her castle. The guy says he's not sure, and then asks what she'll do when she catches these rats. She says she'll deal with them personally, because that's how they do business here in the north. Eloise stayed up all night and organized everything that she and her brother discussed the previous night, which was to track down the spies sent north by Duke Elysian. The girl must disguise the prince with a magic potion and begin his training with training, as well as assess the status of who is in the capital and inform her close comrades of the identity of Cayenne. Eloine should be back soon on the other side, and then says that she is going to go to the border for a short while. The brother, surprised, asks why at such a late hour, and for what purpose. She explains that she needs to restore the boundary stone damaged by His Royal Highness. Eloine says he'll be heading to the border, and she's more experienced in potion making than he is, so she suggests staying here and working on it. He thinks they should at least start by changing His Royal Highness's hair color, as his blonde hair stands out too much. A few hours later, the main character thought that it smelled quite nice, and even though she had brewed it according to Eloise's notes, she didn't know if she had done everything correctly. The girl became interested not only in whether it would kill him, but also in whether he was the main character after all, and in any case, it seemed to her that she would die if she had to brew this potion again. Eloise knows that it works for about 6 months, and to continue hiding the color of his eyes and hair, she will have to do it all every 6 months. The main character doesn't understand why there are no trade unions in this world, because so much work should be considered suicide, and I wonder what kind of life Eloise led. The aide turns to Her Highness and says he saw Sir Eloin leave with Johann. She explains that he went to repair the boundary stone, as that requires the red Vion fluid. Hearing this, Dryden wondered what it meant. They hadn't told him anything again, but he was her assistant, and the lady was asking him to tell her how things were going in the capital. The man asks what exactly she wants to know. Eloise wonders if there was news of His Majesty's funeral. He replies that if she trusts the raven he sent to the capital, the funeral will take place in 10 days. Hearing this, the main character understood that the funeral would be held almost a month after his death, and then asks what rumors are circulating about the whereabouts of the Crown Prince. He says that so far, no one suspects them. The lady asserts that the throne cannot remain vacant in such times, and asks if there is any news of the coronation. The aide replies that it appears the capital is planning to hold it immediately after the funeral. The young lady thinks it's good that the events are happening, according to the plot of the original novel. Dryden apologizes, and then asks if Her Highness will be okay, as she believes her decision to protect the prince could be dangerous. She insists she'll take care of herself, and that when Johann returns, he should escort him to her chambers. The protagonist asks the prince if he slept well. Cain replies that he was scared when he woke up, because she wasn't there. The lady apologizes, and then explains that she needed to leave to prepare a potion. The young gentleman, surprised, asks what she's talking about. The Duchess reminds him of the potion she mentioned earlier, which will change the color of his hair and eyes. The girl informs him that he will have black hair and red eyes just like hers. Cayenne asks what she wants, while the main character reflects on how his color seems to be putting the child off drinking, and then asks if it's too subtle to offer it to him so early in the morning. The Duchess says they can reveal his presence after his wounds are healed. The boy objects, saying he'll drink it. After all, she's the one serving it, and that's what's most important. Then he asks if she still likes cute things. Hearing this, the young lady does not understand what he means and asks about it. The man tells Ellie that he's brought Johann. The protagonist asks to be allowed to introduce him to her people first, and the prince agrees. At this point, Joachim looked at the gentleman and thought about how he hadn't even flinched, and that he could see that this gentleman was the same as always. And he believed that in any case, since Sir Eloin had returned, here chivalry must be in ruins. The gentleman asks Joachim how he managed to keep an eye on the forest, so that the boundary stone ended up in such a position. Hearing this, the man asks for forgiveness, and the gentleman claims that his task is to ease the Duchess's responsibilities, and not to bother her with minor problems like this. Eloin thought that he was in a bad mood since he met the prince, and thought that he seemed to have something planned for his sister, not to mention that Duke Elysian was still unmarried, so he needed to find a wife when he was crowned. The young master reflects on the fact that perhaps he considers Eloise a suitable candidate for his empress, and then says that he will not allow him, and whether it is the crown prince or the future emperor, he has not for a second had the thought of giving his younger sister to either of them. Dryden asks His Highness, and he then informs her that the lady ordered him to bring Joachim to her as soon as he returns. Hearing this, the gentleman thinks he's probably about to introduce him to the crown prince, but doesn't understand why he's smiling so stupidly. The knight captain tells him to lead him, and at that time, he thought that he knew that returning to the north was a good idea, because he is not ashamed of being removed from his post, and initially did not want to be the commander of the Holy Knights. The assistant informed the lady that he had brought Johann. At that moment, the man reflected on how he hadn't liked being in the capital, The gentleman says that from this moment and from this second, they must keep secret everything they saw and heard, because if even one word about what is happening in this castle slips out, he will personally cut off their heads. The man thought that his role in the north was now clear, and if anyone even tried to go against the wishes of his little sister, he would not let them go easily, and this also applied to the crown prince. The captain of the knights greets Her Royal Highness, while the lady looked at the prince and thought that such a face was most likely closer to his true essence than the smiling one that he showed only to her. Ellie reports that these are people who are working with her to help His Royal Highness regain his throne. In the original novel, they all died along with Eloise humans, and her allies were brutally finished off by those beautiful gentle hands. However, the protagonist believes that this time, things will be different from the events in the original novel. The young lady knows that her goal is to help Kyan take the throne and save everyone present, and it has never happened that Eloise did not achieve her goal. It's been 3 weeks since Kyan arrived at her estate, and she understands that the potion is of course wonderful, but she didn't think that it would work as soon as he drank it. The prince asks what is wrong, and the lady insists that everything is fine, and at that time, she thought about the fact that within the walls of her castle, Kyan is officially known as her cousin. The official story is that the former Grand Duke of Eloise's missing father had a half-brother, and this half-brother's son turned out to be a Kyan. Although it's a cliched plot, worthy of a cute TV series, everyone seems to have bought it. Ellie asks if he finished the book, and the man replies that he did. Hearing this, the lady asks if he finished the thick book, and the guy explains that there wasn't much to read. The Duchess asks the name of the emperor, who began managing the waterways. The prince replies that Curtis was the one who, upon hearing this, the main character thought about how he memorized this thick and complex book about the history of the empire in half an hour. Kyan asks if he can read this letter too, and the lady tells him to continue because he still needs to know about it, and at that time, she looked at the guy and thought that she would like him to grow up faster. Eloise knows that he will become emperor, and she will be the imperial teacher, and with his help, she will be able to retire and lead a comfortable life in the north. The prince read that the funeral would be conducted by Duke Elysian, the younger brother of the late emperor, and then says that this is the best course of action they can take since the funeral cannot be delayed indefinitely due to the disappearance of the heir. Kyan says he should be there. The main character insists he should never forget the helplessness he's feeling now, since it was all done by the people who stole his place after all. The young master wonders if this means that the man who is supposed to be his uncle will become emperor. At this time, the main character saw this facial expression, and the prince asked in surprise if this was true, and also wondered what was wrong. Ellie replies that everything is fine, and then says that nothing has been officially confirmed, but it is only a matter of time, and then asks if he really doesn't remember anything, and she means what happened that day. Kyan says that his head starts to hurt when he tries to remember something, and then asks if he is useless to her, if he doesn't remember anything, and thinks that he is just an empty shell of the crown prince. The Duchess, crying out, insisted that this was absolutely not true, and then she thought about how in 5 years, he would reach the palace and meet the Most Holy One, and then fall in love with her at first sight, after which he would ultimately become the most powerful emperor in the world. The main character understands that in order to ensure that some of this success returns to her, she must now work until she sweats, and she realized that she almost said it out loud right now. Eloise reflects that in the future, he will grow into a capable adult Kyan, and that this will not change just because he lost his memory, but one day he will need to remember everything. The lady believes that this is the only way to reveal the culprit behind everything that is happening and demand what rightfully belongs to him. The main character thinks that for some reason, by convincing him in this way, she begins to feel like an evil mentor brainwashing the good-natured hero. The Duchess claims that he should become emperor because he is a good boy, and therefore all he has to do is obey her without question, and then asks if it would be unfair to take everything away from him now. Kyan says that he will do whatever she says. The captain of the knights informs Her Highness that he has discovered them, and the lady says that she knew she could put a price on him, and therefore offers to go with her and the prince because it is time to get to know the reckless little rats who dared to hide in her castle. Eloise asks who the spy was working for. The man replies that he was working for Duke Elysian. The lady said that, as she expected, no one else would dare even try to send a spy into her castle. Meanwhile, she reflected that given Eloise's reputation in the outside world, she wasn't considered particularly hospitable, and it was no wonder she was so feared. With her mere appearance, she instilled a threat, striking down both demonic creatures and humans alike. The man says that in any case, they are dealing with only one spy. The guy kneeling addresses Her Highness and asks her to pardon him just this once. The lady asks Johan what the most important rule of her chivalry is, and he replies that it is the death of a traitor. The lady says that she didn't think he would have the courage to do such a thing, considering that his family lives here, and she understands that the Duke's dog was hiding in her castle. The traitor turns to Her Highness and says that only this time will he beg for mercy and swears allegiance to her for the rest of his days. The Duchess replies that his understanding of loyalty is so frivolous, and therefore she will take into account the time he spent working at her side. The guy asks Her Highness to pardon at least his family, because they knew nothing about this, and he swears this. Eloise informs that his honor will not be tarnished in front of his family, and they will assume that he was killed by demonic creatures during a hunt. The man tells the Duchess that he promised to teach her how to rule his subjects, and then suggests she watch carefully, because that's how he rules his subjects. He then plunges the traitor into eternal sleep. The Duchess says that if he ever realizes someone has betrayed him, he should make sure they are punished as well. Meanwhile, I thought he shouldn't have smiled like that while she was covered in red liquid, because he thinks she probably looked like a bloodthirsty killer. The heroine thought she should comfort the prince and encourage him, not traumatize him. She saw his face turn red and assumed it must have shaken him so much. The lady asks the prince if he's okay. Kayan insists he is and will never forget her advice. At this time, the young lady thought that at times his gaze was very frightening. The captain of the knights asks Her Grace what he should do with the body, and at that time, he noticed that the prince was holding the Duchess's hand, and he became curious about what he was thinking about. Her Highness suggests making it look like he was attacked by a demon and returned the family's body, and then asks if Johan is listening to her. At this time, the main character does not understand why Johan looks as if he saw something he shouldn't, and she became curious about what's going on in his head. The prince turns to the lady and invites her to return, since she no longer needs to stay and control what they do with the body. The girl thought that he didn't look as traumatized as she thought, and thought that it was a relief for her, and then said that she didn't need to stay and agreed with him. Ellie thought that she would be able to take her hand, but the prince grabbed it and asked her not to let him go, no matter what happened. Let her never do this and not let him go. The prince says he needs to rest a bit in his room. The lady, surprised, asks if he's feeling unwell. He explains that he's fine, but thinks he'll feel even better if he rests. The Duchess reflects on how she thought such a scene would shock a child who had lost his memories. At this time, the young gentleman, when he came into the room, did not understand why since childhood he was an ideal heir, and to put it mildly, he looked quite mature, but to be honest, he was a child who behaved too maturely compared to his peers. The guy remembers that one day he was heading to training as usual, and it was a warm spring day, and among all the bright beauties, this girl with raven-colored hair immediately caught his attention. The young gentleman asked what she was doing there, and the lady replied that the rabbit looked so cute. The prince realized she was the daughter of the Duke of Viana from the north. The girl asked if he wasn't in a hurry to get to training, and then said that His Royal Highness would be scolded if he was late. Hearing this, Kayen is surprised and asks if she knows him, and the lady says that he is the crown prince and asks if she said it correctly. The boy says he knows who she is too, and then reveals that she is the daughter of the Duke of Viana. The young lady suggests calling her Eloise. The prince asks why she is here. Ellie explains that the rabbit looked so cute that she followed it and ended up getting lost. The young gentleman asks if she likes cute things, and then the rabbit runs away. Kayan asks if she wants him to take her to Duke Wayan. She replies that it's not necessary since her older brother will be arriving soon, and then asks His Royal Highness how long he's been training. When the girl approached the guy, she realized that he was quite short, but he thought that this lady was very tall. Ellie says that in fact she also trains with a sword, and upon hearing this, the young gentleman was surprised because she is a girl. The lady says she never knows what will happen, because one day she might become a duchess. The prince claims the duke already has a successor, and then asks if that's not true. The girl says it was a joke and she's taking lessons to prepare for the future. He asks surprised what she's talking about. Ellie explains that she means that she must protect the North, and then states that he must also work hard, because he needs to protect the people of their country. Kayan asks if she ever considered becoming an empress in the future. The protagonist says she'll think about it when she grows up, then smiles. At this time, the prince thought that from that day on, he had never met Eloise again, And while he was attending classes for the crown prince, Ellie became a duchess and had to fulfill her duty of defending the North. Kyan thought that he only remembered Eloise's face once when he received the news that she had become a duchess, but he thought about it because it would be wise to bring her to his side since she would be a good help when he ascended to the throne. Sometime after his father's murder, the boy escaped from the assassin's ambush at the imperial palace and at the same time rode north without thinking. Kyan believed that he was not so stupid as to pass through the main gate into the castle because the only way out was to cross the border and go into the forest, but he had to fight with demons that attacked from all sides. The prince remembers that this happened just at the moment when he managed to break the boundary stone and enter the forest, and these damn demons and the boundary stone completely exhausted him. Eloise Vaiana, Grand Duchess of the North, and the only person with the power to oppose the imperial family, reflects on how he has dedicated his entire life to gaining the throne and has no intention of giving up so easily. At this moment, the young gentleman couldn't understand why he was so sleepy right now. When the girl saw him, she asked what she should do about it. At that moment, he heard a familiar voice and then said he had found Eloise. When the young master woke up, he didn't understand what this place was. The maid told her mistress that all she had done was help her dispose of the murderer's body and return to the castle, so the Duchess shouldn't worry, as she would keep everything she saw a secret. His Majesty does not understand why she treated his wound, and believes that the fact that she did it without asking anything in return does not mean that he can trust her. The boy knows that he has never trusted anyone since childhood, because in fact, growing up in the imperial palace made him like this since he was attacked by assassins from childhood, and even the nanny, whom he considered a close person, was in league with the killers. The young master understood that trusting anyone would be the most foolish thing he could do the crown prince. After all, he wondered if Ellie would truly remain loyal to the crown prince, who had lost his memory. Kyan knew that his plan was to test the Duchess's loyalty by pretending to have lost his memories. The prince thought that he had managed to reach the north, but he did not understand what he should do now because he had said that he had lost his memories, and she, without the slightest hesitation, believed all his words. The guy understands that most people wouldn't know what to do, but she offered to address him as the crown prince and allowed him to use the bathroom. He said that from now on, he would obey only her, and he smiled sweetly as he said it. The young gentleman believed that people are instinctively drawn to cute things, and he realized that he needed to be a cute boy, because the North was the territory of the Grand Duchess, and winning her over to his side meant gaining the support of the entire North as well. Kyan believed that in order to become stronger and take the throne, he needed Eloise, and from that day on, he continued to try hard to please her and win her favor with his sweet and naive behavior. His Majesty was thinking about this, however. As with other people, he did not plan to show her his true feelings, because this was not at all part of his plans. The young gentleman does not understand why at that moment his heart began to ache, and he did not understand what was happening to him. The next day, the main character asks him if he's feeling okay. The prince, surprised, asks what she's talking about. The lady explains that she recently killed a man, and he saw it all, and therefore began to worry as soon as he went to rest in his room. Kyan claims that he is fine because she was just doing her job, and it was done to protect him, and then asks if that is true. The Duchess says that, to be honest, she thought he was shocked by what he saw, especially after he lost his memories, and she means that he wouldn't have been shocked by something like this before. The prince asks in surprise why she is behaving so formally with him, and then reminds him that he already said to call him by his name, and even if the memories return to him, he wants her to call him by his name. The main character addresses His Royal Highness and informs him that only one person has the right to address him that way, and that is the Empress. The lady thought about the fact that she was talking about the saint who was currently in the capital. After all, it had been quite some time since she had asked Eloin to monitor her actions, and she was interested in how things were going with him. The girl doesn't even know how true the image of the saint she imagines is, and the prince says she is allowed to call him by his name. Hearing this, Ellie thought that in the imperial family, the name plays a big role, and he so easily allows her to use it. According to the law of the empire, the names of the members of the imperial family, with the exception of the emperor himself, are not disclosed to the general public. This law was made in order to prevent crimes committed under the name of the royal family. The main character doesn't understand why he insists on calling her KN. The prince explains that he has no one else who can call him by his first name and never had one before. Eloise agrees with him and claims that this definitely didn't happen in the past, and then she realized what he said and asks if his memories have returned to him. The young gentleman replies that he remembered some moments of his life in snatches, and he did not tell her anything about it because he was worried that she would start to treat him formally if the memories returned. The young woman claims that this is not true, and then says that until he changes his attitude towards her, she will not change him either, and if his memories return, and he wants her to address him as Crown Prince, then she will do so. The lady says that if he wants to leave everything as is, she will follow his wishes. Hearing this, he is surprised and asks if this is true and if she promises him. The young gentleman approaches the girl and asks if Johann fits her type of man. She surprised asks what he's talking about and then asserts that he's simply the commander of her knights. Cayenne asks if this man is her type. She denies it and he offers to tell her what type she likes. Eloise says that he should be a head taller than her, and it would be good if his status was higher, because she believes that there will be something to learn. The main character asks if he should be a handsome man with a lot of money, young and rich, tall and handsome, and then says that probably such a thing does not exist. Suddenly, the girl thought about how she had just described Cain in the future, who could be described with the tags arrogant protagonist and cold-blooded hero, and she realized that she needed to describe completely opposite traits. The young lady remembers that when she was in prison, he came to her and said that he knew that he was her type, but she could not kidnap the saint only because she had gone crazy from love for him. The Duchess thought about how she would like to avoid such a turn of events, and then tells the guy not to worry about it, because she would like him to be soft, kind, sweet, sympathetic, and attractive, because such guys are to her taste. His Majesty says that he understands and will keep this in mind. The next morning, Cayenne joined her patrol in the forest. The main character looked at the boy and thought he was doing quite well, and thought it was probably due to muscle memory. Suddenly, the prince fell, and the lady screamed, asking if he was okay, and quickly approached him, and then offered to let her see where he hit. A minute ago, from Johann's point of view, he thought about hearing that the prince was a fencing genius, and then he realized that he was only a teenager, but his skills were already almost perfect. The people in the north are taller than those in other regions of the empire, so when it comes to fencing, they have an advantage, but he doesn't show any tension in sparring with him. Johann understood that he was the true identity of the crown prince, since the way the young man looked at him now was completely different from his behavior in front of the Duchess, but he did not understand why he was hiding this side from her. The knight captain asks if he's thinking about anything else right now. At that moment, the prince thinks about how he opened up and then fell to the ground. At this time, the man thought that he had just stopped attacking and then turned to His Highness and asked if he was okay. And when he heard the lady scream, he thought that this guy had deliberately fallen in front of Her Highness. Johann reflects on how it was unpleasant for him to see the crown prince holding the Duchess's hand, but when they met each other's eyes, there was anger and a warning to stay away from what he considered his. The commander realized that during the battle, he had looked at him with such a look as if he wanted to finish him off, and now he was pretending to be weak next to her ladyship. Cain tells the lady that he must have been nervous, and the lady says that his hands are shaking and thinks that it's probably because he was holding the sword too tightly. Johann looked at the young gentleman and thought that he was a cunning fox. A few hours later, Ellie tells His Highness that he looks better after a little rest, and then asks how he's feeling. He replies that he's better and not so scared anymore. The lady asks Johann what he thinks of His Royal Highness's skills. The man replies that he is very gifted and is confident that in a couple of years he will surpass him, then asks why she is asking him and not Eloise. And the Duchess replies that this is because, but she realized that she asked the question incorrectly, and then explains that she means His Highness's face, and at that time she thought that this was a wound from the aura of the sword. Eloise asks Johann if he used the sword's aura against him, and then claims he should have been more careful. The man insists it wasn't him, but the lady asks who it could have been, since it was just the two of them there. The lady says that she apologizes and will immediately invite the doctor to examine him, and therefore asks him to go to the room first, because today she needs to talk to Johann. The young gentleman claims she's speaking formally to him again, then reminds him that he said everything was fine and offers to relax with him. The girl reports that he has a wound on his face. Cayenne believes that if she feels sorry, then she asks to be allowed to stay here and listen to what they want to talk about in private. The protagonist approaches her guard and asks him to report, then asks if anything unusual happened today. He replies that the demons have been missing for the past couple of days. At this time, the Duchess thought about the hordes of demons that were previously on these lands, after the appearance of Cayenne disappeared from sight, and it is interesting whether it could be that their activity was connected with the prince. However, she does not remember this in the original plot. The Duchess thinks there's something odd there, and she's lost in thought. The captain asks if he should assemble a search party, then says that if she tells him, he'll do it right away. Eloise objects, and then says that she will take a look herself first, since they were planning to go into the forest together today anyway. Hearing this, Johann, surprised, asks if she's talking about herself and the crown prince. She replies that she'll protect him, and then asks what the problem is. The captain says he thinks this isn't a very good idea. The prince asks the lady if she's finished, and then suggests they leave. The Duchess tells Johann that he can go about his duties, and then turns to the prince and offers to treat his wound before setting out on their journey. The captain turns to her ladyship and asks her to contact him if anything happens, as he's worried. She asks him, surprised, what's wrong with him today, and then can't understand what could happen when she's with him. The lady touches his face and asks if it hurts. The young gentleman replies that it's bearable, but she insists he should get used to this kind of pain. Cayenne asks if she's gotten used to it too. She replies that she thinks she has in a sense, and he says he doesn't want a lady to get used to that. Ellie believes that he can make sure that this does not happen, and that he can do whatever he wants when he becomes emperor, and therefore asks that when this happens, he not forget about her. The main character thought that he is not the only ray of light destroying demons in the north, and she understands that he can date Saint Roseanne because she does not want to be his only best friend. And Eloise doesn't think she'll ever encounter the saint again. After all, then, the Cayenne should be able to take care of his beloved without her help. The lady thinks that it would be great if she had a chance to become friends with the saint when she and Cayenne start dating, because she will be the woman of the man who holds her destiny in his hands, and therefore she thinks that it would not hurt to establish a good relationship with her. The girl thinks that she just needs to endure a few years, and they will pass very quickly, and then one day she will be free from all this work. The main character believes that from this day on, she should focus on taking care of the prince, as she could even give him a couple of dating tips if she had time. His Majesty says that when he becomes emperor, this is what he can do for her. He will try his best, but he still wants the lady to fulfill one of his wishes. The Duchess agrees with him, and at this time does not understand what a 16-year-old child could want, and thinks that it is unlikely to be something serious, and then says that she promises. Ellie says that of course she can fulfill one wish of her savior, which will help her get rid of this endless work. His Majesty says with delight that this is excellent because she promised. Cayenne, while in the forest, says that he is familiar with this place, and he remembers what happened after he crossed the border, although all his memories up to this point are vague. The gentleman says that the boundary stone that he damaged must be somewhere here. Ellie picked it up and said that here it was the boundary stone that had been in his path, but the young man insisted that he was sure he had damaged it. The lady reports that her brother has subjugated him. The prince reminds her that she said her brother is currently in the capital, and then asks if he will return here. The Duchess replies that he should return within a few days to complete the task, and if he finds the right person in the capital, that person should help find the cause of his amnesia, and therefore she is confident that he will cope with the task and return as soon as possible. The main character turns to the guy and asks if he remembers how he managed to cross the border, and at that time, I thought that if the prince could cross the border and penetrate the north, then that means something and someone else can too, and therefore she must know how he did it in order to protect the north. Cayenne says that he thought that going through the main gate would be dangerous because there might be spies nearby, so he decided to cross the border into the forest, and it turned out that there were fewer demons than he expected. Hearing this, the lady was surprised and asked if there was a little demon, and remembered that on that day, they spent the whole day destroying demons in these forest places. Ellie thought that the prince must have crossed the border after they finished, which was expected from the main character, because luck was on his side. The young gentleman turns to the lady and says that he is behind her, and at that time, she thought that even without turning around, she could easily tell that a demon had appeared. The demon appeared because of her manipulation of the boundary stone, as she wanted to summon the demon and test it. If the demon is here, he should prepare for battle and draw his sword, because Cayenne shouldn't be standing there, shouting her name, and wondering if the girl should initiate the fight. The main character thought that she was not trying to force him to save her, because she even took a dagger with her just in case, and wanted to test his skills at least once. The young lady thinks that if he doesn't want to use the sword, then she will finish off the demon herself and thinks that maybe he is not ready yet, and therefore thinks that she should. The Duchess saw that the prince had dealt with the demon, and she got goosebumps, and when she looked at him, she remembered that the prince had the same face when he portaled Eloise in the novel, and realized that this is the look he would have if she died as in the original story. His Majesty turns to the lady and asks if she's all right. She says he was just a little too close to touching her, then thanks the prince. The girl asks why he looks so depressed, and also asks if he was scared. He replies that he was a little scared. Eloise says that this is the first time for him, and as soon as he gets used to it, he will react calmly to this, and then claims that he is very talented, and asks if he knows this. The main character says that not many people can kill a demon alone, and he did very well. Then she pats his head. His Majesty asks if she wants him to be good at fencing. Ellie believes that it will help him stand up for himself if something happens in the future. The girl says that mercenaries will attack him, and it's not just about protecting himself, because one day a person may appear whom he will need to protect. The main character asks in surprise what happened. He says that he wants to hold her hands, but they are both in a red liquid. At this point, the lady thought about how she was sure Kazan wasn't that kind of person in the novel, and thought he might be more gentle than she thought. Then she said it was okay, because her hands were dirty too. Ellie reflects on the fact that he is not yet the scary protagonist of the novel, but a 15-year-old boy, and he is still a child to her. And then she reaches for his hand and thinks that his hand has become bigger, and now, when she thinks about it, it looks like he has become taller, and she believes that children as a rule grow up quickly. The Duchess sent Eloine and Drayden to the capital to find the right person who might know how to help Kazan regain his memories. The assistant informs her ladyship that he has already returned, and at this time the main character thought that he returned earlier than she did. The lady sent her assistant after Ellen for 2 reasons. First, she needed him to attend the funeral of the former emperor, and second, to find clues about Kazan's memory loss. The lady says good work, and then asks how the funeral went. Drayden replies that there were no problems. The Duchess says she has many questions, none of them urgent, and then asks if they can continue tomorrow. Hearing this, the man thanks her grace, and then says that if he doesn't get some sleep, he feels like he'll die. Ellie asks where her brother is, and he replies that he's in the living room. The lady says she'll go there alone and suggests he go and rest. Eloise asks the young gentleman if he has found the right person. Eloine is informed that he has found it, but unfortunately, the one in question has become very sick from riding and is therefore unable to speak to her now. The lady says that Drayden looked so tired, as if he was on the verge of death, and then asks why they were in such a hurry. The young gentleman replies that it is because he cannot do otherwise when he senses something is wrong, and then announces that he plans to remove this mask as quickly as he can. Eloine reports that he is indeed wondering, and she is wondering whether their dear crown prince could have lost his memory or not. At this time, the main character thought that if this man was from the capital, but suddenly, His Highness entered the room and asked if she had been here all this time. The prince saw the lady's brother and asked if he had returned. Eloine apologized, and His Majesty said that it was okay, since he hadn't said anything at all. At this time, the girl thought that maybe she just had a premonition, because she didn't understand why they looked like they wanted to kill each other. The lady asks the boys what they're doing, and the gentleman, surprised, asks what she's talking about. At this point, she thinks nothing good will come from Elin being hostile to Kane, knowing he might be cold, but will be nice to her. The main character thought that perhaps she would even be sad when his memories returned, because in the end, he would no longer behave as sweetly as he did now. Kane asks Eloise what happened. She asks if he will sit next to Elon. The young gentleman asks if he's comfortable sitting next to him. Ellie asks her brother when she can meet the man he brought. The guy explains that the nausea should have passed by now, but he has a feeling that this person has lost consciousness from alcohol. The lady tells him not to say that the man he brought is a Shur. Eloine asks if she knows about this sorcerer. The main character thought that the Shire was really in her castle now, and she understands that since Eloise did not know about the Shire in the original story, the surprise from Eloise should have happened, because Eloise was never interested in magicians. Shur wasn't working on the mainland, so the two had no chance of meeting. The young gentleman claims he's a drunkard, but he could be useful. The lady believes that if this is the sorcerer they are talking about, then it will definitely be impossible to talk to him today, and thought that things are taking a strange turn, because first the Cayenne came to her castle, and now the Shire. Eloise became curious when the prince learned about the Shire in the original story, and thinks that they met when he was still young. The assistant turns to her ladyship and says he's glad she's still here, then asks if she has a minute. The lady reminds him that she told him to go and rest. Drayden says he drank a healing potion before coming and can't sleep because he wants to talk to her. His brother says he'll go to his room because he remembered something he wanted to do. Ellie wonders if the aristocrats showed their displeasure. The man says they didn't, and the Elysian Hertz was looking for her. The lady asks if he hasn't relieved him of his duties, and then asks her brother what kind of things he's doing. It is understandable why Duke Elysian would look for her, because he wants to win the main character over to his side, and if this is not so, then it is likely that he wants to take the opportunity to confuse her, and she wonders if Duke Elysian was really the one who finished off the Emperor. The culprit was supposed to be revealed in the 3rd season, but she was sent to this world before learning the truth. The main character asks when the coronation will take place, and he asks if she plans to go. The girl says that it is possible, and at that time, she thought that she really has no desire to go there, but she must remember this date, and then asks how the saint is doing. Brother says that she seems to be doing quite well, and he means that Duke Elysian would not dare to harm the church. Drayden asks her ladyship why she's suddenly become so concerned about the Saint Ellie, explains that she believes she could be useful to the crown prince in the future, and believes there's no reason to worry about Rosanna's safety. The main character understands that at the moment she should focus on raising a good person in Cayenne. Eloise came into the room and said that he is not here because she thought that Cayenne would be here, but this also makes her a little sad that he is nowhere to be found, and she is more worried about the fact that she notices that the young master is becoming nicer every day. The girl thought that he was like a little chick who was always next to her, but understood that she should concentrate on work. Suddenly, the lady saw a strange object and does not understand since when it has been in her desk drawer because it looks like a keyhole. Eloise remembered that this was the necklace she found when she first woke up in this body, and it was shaped like a keyhole. The young lady saw that the secret shelf had opened, and there was a diary, and when she opened the book, she realized that she had a way to see the future. At this time, the prince came into the room where the sorcerer was resting and saw him sleeping, then took a pencil and tickled him. When the Shir woke up, the young master greeted him and asked if he had to wake him up like this every time. Then he told him to get up right away. The mage tried to get out of bed, but suddenly fell to the floor. He said it was incredibly painful, and then reported that Duke Eloin had spoken of His Highness. Kane, surprised, asks if he's not even aware of current events, and therefore thinks he shouldn't drink so much. The man agrees, and then says that the Grand Duchess Lady Eloise is currently. Shir looked at the master, and does not understand how he changed the color of his eyes and hair, and thinks that it must definitely be magic, but despite the fact that he is a sorcerer, he has never seen anything like this before. Although he understands that the reason he was brought to the north is to check on a person who has lost his memories, and this is His Majesty. The man thought that if he forgot that the crown prince was still alive, it meant that he had been hiding in the north all this time, and in addition to everything, he had lost his memories. The magician asks if it's a lie that he's lost his memories. The prince tells him to watch his words, unless he wants his tongue cut out right now. Cayenne wonders if he has already forgotten that he once saved his life. 2 years ago, he got into a fight, and while drunk was nearly killed, but suddenly he saw His Royal Highness. The prince claims the sorcerer never forgets to repay his debt, and then asks if he's right. The man agrees, and then thinks about how he was lured here by the commander of the Holy Knights, who offered to try the liquor in the north, but he never imagined he'd bring it to the crown prince. His Majesty tells him to lie about his memories of Eloise. The man understands that the payment of his debt is to lie in his memories, and he was frightened because of such a trifle, and then asks what lie he is talking about. The prince explains that he must tell the lady that his memory will return slowly, and very, very slowly. Shir asks if this is really necessary, and the gentleman explains that he likes the way he lives now, and thought that Eloise tends to show weakness around him, since she usually keeps aloof. The young gentleman thought that when he looks at her happily with sweet eyes, or pretends to be upset, she smiles at him and seems to be trying to console him, and he likes this smile. Cayenne isn't sure why he likes Eloise's smile so much, because he knows she definitely won't be happy to hear that he cheated on her, and so the man will have to lie to her. The sorcerer asks if he lied about having amnesia, and then says that he thinks the Grand Duchess would be willing to let things slide. The prince asks in surprise if he really thinks so, and the man explains that since she is very familiar with political intrigues, she probably already knows that he is not in a position to completely trust her. Shir says that she will simply think that he lied to her out of caution, and he thinks that she will understand, but what he cannot understand is that he asks why he wants to spend the sorcerer's debt on such an insignificant thing. The man says that she will most likely say the phrase to forgive her for her insolence because she did not want it, and most likely she will distance herself from him and will treat the crown prince like everyone else. The guy thought that his childish behavior as a 16-year-old boy would no longer work, and she would most likely not smile at him like that anymore. The young gentleman reflects that, as he thought it would be better to just smile and act as sweetly and naively as he did before. The sorcerer asks if he thinks that if he behaves this way, he will be able to become closer to the Duchess, since he believes that he could use her power and influence to expand his capabilities. The prince wondered if she was being kind to him, only for political reasons, as the Shir said. However, he realized that thinking about it made him feel uncomfortable. The magician says that of course the best way to get someone on your side is marriage, and considers that this is the best option for a union, and then asks if their age difference is that big. Hearing this, His Majesty thought that he had never thought about marriage before, and he wondered why he got butterflies in his stomach when he heard about marriage and his heart beat so hard. The prince believes that this is because he found himself a political partner, as Shir said. The sorcerer says he doesn't know whether he should tell the Grand Duchess that His Highness's memory will recover very slowly, and the Duchess shouldn't worry or rush things. Then he asks if the prince plans to tell her the truth. Cayenne says that this will happen in due time, and the magician wonders whether his debt will then be repaid, and at that time, he thought that he could not believe that the debt for saving his life would be repaid with such a simple lie. The man understands that he is still terrified of the one to whom he must lie, because the Duchess of the North and her older brother are ruthless and cold, and he understands perfectly well who he is dealing with. The mage realizes that their cunning crown prince is determined to keep this lie a secret, and believes that they will never know the truth. His Majesty asks if he thinks that one lie is enough to pay the debt for saving a life, and then claims that he is even more impudent than he thought. The prince warns him that if he says anything stupid to Eloise, his tongue will be cut out on the spot. The magician, hearing this, was horrified, then looked at the alcohol and thought that if he had a little more to drink, he would die peacefully. The sorcerer says that since he is in the north, he is wondering if he should perhaps explore the local magic, and thinks that this is an excellent idea. The main character asks if he is saying that His Highness's memory will slowly return. From the prince asks very, very slowly. Shir reports that His Royal Highness must have been in severe shock, and a lion asks if he is sure since he knows how skilled he is at lying. The mage smiled and said he was saying some funny things. Meanwhile, the main character realized she'd imagined the Shira quite differently. In the original story, he was described as a very skilled sorcerer, so I thought he would be arrogant. Eloise asks His Royal Highness if he remembers nothing before crossing the northern border. He replies that he does have some memories, and remembers living in the palace, but only fragments. The main character says that there is no need to be upset, and at that time, she thought that it would be even better for her if his memories returned a little later, because he is such a good boy now, and she understands that it is even easier to make friends with someone nice than with someone irritable. Kayan asks if she's upset because his memory will slowly return. She counters, explaining that she'll never be upset by something like that, and then he takes her hands. Elion asks her sister if she has to hold hands while talking. Hearing this, the girl takes her hand back and thinks she understands that in her eyes, he's nothing more than a child, and that soon he'll grow up and need to get engaged, so she thinks maybe she shouldn't act like that in front of others. Shir turns to Her Highness and informs her that, as a wizard, he cannot help but inquire how she managed to change the color of His Highness's hair. Ellie asks if he's interested in magic potions. He says yes, of course he is, since he knows a lot about medicinal herbs. At this time, the main character thought that her plans did not include irradiating the Shir to brew a potion, but she understands that she needs him in the north because his skills were very useful, and perhaps this is not such a bad chance to take advantage of the opportunity and make friends with him. The Duchess thinks that she has the ability to see the future because perhaps he can tell her about this ability. The lady says that she wants to ask him for a favor, and she intends to pay for this service, and then offers to go with her, and the two of them stay here. When the guys heard this, he asked in surprise why, and the lady explained that this was a personal matter, and only the Shir could go with her. When they went out into the hallway, Eloise pinned the man against the wall, and then said she was ready to strangle him, but held back. She then asked him why he was doing this, as she believed he had lied to her and asked if that was true. Shir asks in surprise what she is talking about, and the lady explains that she is talking about the crown prince's memories returning slowly, and she asks if any of this is a lie. The sorcerer objects and claims that, of course, not because he only spoke the truth. The main character pushes the man, and he falls to the floor, and then says that if it turns out that he lied to her, she will cut off his head. Eloise invites the assistant to come in, as there is something he needs to do for her. The young lady reflects on how she needs 5 minutes to rest, because after the Shear joined them, her workload is off the charts, but she thinks she can see the future. The girl says that this means that Eloise is gone, and she has the ability to see the future, and she does not understand why the diary cannot be more useful. The main character believes that if she can really see the future, as the diary says, then she can stay far ahead of the original story, and her retirement will come even earlier. Eloise understands that this is a very important question for her, because in fact it is difficult to understand what exactly is meant by seeing the future or receiving prophecies, because if this refers to a prophecy, then she should have received at least one by now. The girl reflects on the fact that she did not see a single vision while she was in this body, and in this diary, in very small handwriting, the necessary conditions are written. Ellie thought that of all people, the Shire would definitely know something about this, but she couldn't get anything out of him, and in the end, she asked him to make something else for her, and that was a potion to create a temporary scar. When the sorcerer heard about this, he asked for forgiveness, because he was afraid, because he had never done anything like this. The Duchess asks if his eyes are just for decoration on his face, and then informs him that everything he needs to know is written right here. The main character says that she is trying her best to share the recipe for a potion that has been passed down exclusively in the Wyan house from generation to generation, and then asks if that is all his reaction, and says that she is disappointed. The sorcerer says that he must be a little drunk, and then says that he will make every effort to make it. Shear asks if he can ask her why she needs a potion that will create a scar. The lady says it's none of his business, since she gave him the job, and asks why the hell he hasn't started yet. Eloin muses that Duke Elysian could visit the north at any time, so to make sure he doesn't recognize Cain, she should at least keep a similar potion on hand, just in case. The mage approaches her ladyship and informs her that he's read the recipe, and it appears he'll need some heliotrope. She asks if he means the plants that grow near the border. The man says he'll have to go deep into the forest to collect them. The lady suggests talking to her brother and making the potion as quickly as possible. Shear asks if he could talk to Sir Johann instead, as Sir Ellen scares him a little. The Duchess asks if he doesn't like her brother. Then what about her? And also wonders whether she frightens him even more or not, because she is very interested to know. The sorcerer asks to forgive him, and then says that he is already leaving, and will immediately go to Sir Eloy. Ellie thinks that she needs to take a little break, because she was too harsh with the Shur, and now that she thinks about it, maybe she scared him too much. The lady thought that Johann was very busy now, and he had a very important task, and therefore she could not send this unbearable sorcerer to him. Lately, Johann has been closely involved in training Cain, and since she has become even more busy with work, she has no time left to look after the prince. The girl thought that maybe he was bored without her, and therefore he concentrated hard on fencing, which in turn added more work for Elos. While Johann remains the commander of the knights in the north and trains Cain, some of his duties were transferred to Elon, and noticing that the demon activity these days was unusual, Elon voluntarily assembled and led a reconnaissance group. The main character reflects on how grateful she is to be surrounded by so many capable people, and that if she had to deal with this alone, she would have already died by now. Suddenly, Drayden comes into the lady's office, and she asks in surprise why he is so excited and what happened. The assistant reports that he has disturbing news, and then says that the prince is wounded. During training, Cain reflects on the fact that he doesn't know what Eloise has been up to all these days, and suggests that maybe she forgot about him, since she never visited him during this time. The knight captain suggests that His Highness concentrate on training, and then asks in surprise why he opened up. The prince claims that he is collected, and at this time, he thought that he does not know whether he should now say that he remembers everything, but he believes that if he does this, the lady will distance herself from him. His Highness reflects on the fact that he thought she would like him even more if he remained sweet and obedient, and he does not understand why. The man asks the prince if he should call it a day. Meanwhile, Cain thinks that if Eloise hears he had a short training session today, she'll come visit him. The guy thinks about how she said that she would like a man who is good at fencing, and she might think that he is pathetic if he finishes now. Kazan asks Johan if he's currently engaged to someone. He replies that he's not, and the gentleman asks why. Johan explains that the post of commander of the Knights of the North is very dangerous, and for the commander of a knight in the North, it is normal not to be married. The prince asks if he's sure he's not interested in Eloise. Hearing this, the man objects and assures him that he would never have dared to entertain such thoughts, and that it had never even occurred to him. At this time, the man thought that he continued to find a way to keep her ladyship close to him, and he even dropped his sword on purpose, and therefore he is also sure that he did not even leave a scratch on his cheek. Johan believes that he did it on purpose, and that it was in order to attract the attention of Her Highness, but he does not understand why the crown prince would do this. Kazan tells the man to raise his sword, and Johan asks in surprise if he will focus on the fight this time. The young master thought he should give it his all, and then they began training. Suddenly, the boy realized that Eloise wasn't engaged to anyone yet, but the sword somehow slipped and wounded the prince. Kazan apologizes, believing it was due to his carelessness. Her Majesty says she doesn't think so, and therefore tells him not to blame himself for something he didn't do. The main character tells him to remember that he is the commander of the Knights of the North, and then says that he can go. Eloise turns to His Majesty and says that being distracted while practicing with a sword is very dangerous, because if he were on the battlefield, he could already be dead. Kazan says it's because he couldn't stop worrying about her being angry with him. Hearing this, the lady asks in surprise why she should be angry. The prince reminds her that she hasn't visited him in a few days, and then asks her to hold his hand. The girl says that from now on, she will only hold his hand when they are alone, and asks if he agrees. The guy asks why surprised, and she explains that he's the crown prince and should behave accordingly in public. He asks her to hold his hand when they're alone. At this time, the main character thought that it looked like Kazan had really opened up to her and believed that she should use this chance to strengthen their connection even more. Eloise tells him that he comes first for her and has no idea how worried she was when she heard that he was injured. The prince asks if she can promise him that he will always come first. The young lady insists that she certainly does. The guy says that it's good that she promised him because he believes that the Grand Duchess should never go back on her promise. After that day, time flew by unnoticed, and a year passed before the young lady realized that spring had come to the northern lands, and the prince had managed to grow up a lot because he met his 17th spring with her in the north. Kazan asks the lady if she's come to see him. She says yes, and suggests he ignore her and continue studying. The guy agrees and says that she should watch him. The mage says that as expected of members of the royal family, his height is something special. Shur had been in the north all this time, and she tried to find a way to lure him to her side, but he stayed there of his own free will. One day, when the sorcerer was fast asleep under the influence of alcohol, Eloise forced him to enter into an unfavorable contract, and he did indeed object at first, but it didn't last long. Shir asks in surprise if he can really use everything that is there, and then screaming says that her desire is an order for him. The magician gave in easily when the main character offered him a laboratory with high-quality equipment for his research. The sorcerer says that he brought another interesting piece of news from the capital. The main character understands that the Shir is a sorcerer who prefers to work in the shadows, and thanks to this, in addition to the information that can be obtained in the usual way, the Shir can tell her secrets that were sold. The mage believes he knows her ladyship would never stoop so low as to ask for information for free. She says the liquor he spoke of yesterday is now his. Hearing this, the man with red hair was delighted, and then reported that he had heard that the emperor was looking for an empress. Eloise realizes that about 2 years have passed since Duke Elysian was crowned emperor. Ellie asks how old the duke, or rather Emperor Elysian, is. He replies that he's about 25 this year. The girl became curious about what noble lady he married in the novella because she cannot remember whether he got married at all, and then asks what candidates there are. Shir explains that there are quite a lot of ladies who want to become empress, and the lady asks if the saint was mentioned by chance. Hearing this, the magician believes that the church will never allow this, and will never accept it. The Duchess thought that this was right, and it didn't matter who he married, because the main thing was that she wasn't a saint. Shir asks her ladyship if she plans to marry one day. She's surprised to hear this, and asks if he's still drunk. The man apologizes and says it was just a question. Ellie suggests listening to her carefully, and then explains that it is unpleasant to be with someone who is on a lower level in which he is, because of this, the other person will feel inferior, and then asks what man in the empire can satisfy and surpass her level. The sorcerer says that it is the emperor, and she asks if he has forgotten that she is protecting and training the prince in order to overthrow the emperor. The magician asks if Prince Kayan becomes emperor, wouldn't he be suitable? The lady explains that she is his mentor, and in fact, the prince already has someone. Shur asks if he's engaged to someone, and then says he's never heard of it. The lady explains that he's not engaged, but there's someone she wants to introduce him to. Ellie asks what he's doing at this hour, and whether he should be working. The magician says he thinks he needs to go to the border. The lady says that she will provide him with a knight to accompany him, and therefore suggests that they get to work. After some time, Eloan's reconnaissance squad discovered why the demons were acting strangely, and it was because the border now had a new master. The border had always been dragon territory, but with the recent change of master demons, had begun to run amok. The main character believed the problem was that it wasn't time yet, as it looked as if someone had deliberately interfered. The girl believes that she should have dealt with this problem from the very beginning, but now it is difficult to focus only on this, since she knows that making Kayan emperor is a priority. Shir says that then he hopes that the lady will give him a bottle of liquor today, and he will go to the laboratory and work hard. Johann announces that he surrenders, and the prince asks Eloise if she saw him win. The knight captain congratulates his highness, and the lady says it's not every day she sees Johann lose. The captain apologizes. The duchess tells him not to be so harsh with Suvorov, since his royal highness has significantly improved his skills thanks to his training. Kane turns to the lady and says he's won, so she should be looking at him right now. She agrees, and then asks about going for a walk together this evening. Johann asks where her highness is heading, and she replies that she promised his royal highness that they would go outside together if he won the duel. The knight captain says that he understands, and is not surprised that he fought as if his life depended on it, and then suggests that they forget what he said and wish to have a good time together. Ellie suggests the prince leave as soon as he changes. Meanwhile, she's thinking about how she'll be able to leave the castle for once thanks to the Kayan, since she's been toiling day and night locked up in the north. The main character thought that it had been an eternity since she had any freedom, because she was still working hard, so it was time to go outside and take a break. While on the main street of the city, the young lady thought about how much time had passed since she was outside the castle, and then tells the prince that she will need to go on patrol, and soon she will need to make a tour of the surrounding area, because it has been a long time since she did this last time. Kayan asks if he can come with her. She says he could be in danger, and if people recognize his face, it could increase the risk of him becoming known in the capital. The guy looked at the lady and asked if she was worried about him. Meanwhile, the girl was thinking that if he was discovered, she in the north would be in danger, and that's what she was worried about. Then she said, of course, because if he was in danger, the server would be too. The main character says she's worried about the civilians too. The prince, however, believes that if she goes alone, he won't see her for several days. The lady says she's also concerned about this, and he also needs to learn to command his men. The gentleman says he'll take the Shira potion, as he invented one that can create scars. Developed by Shur does not create temporary scars, but rather burn marks, and thus it will be difficult to recognize Kayan's face if he takes it. The Duchess understands that although the potion was prepared for this very purpose, she doesn't think that showing the Cayenne to everyone is a good idea. The young gentleman asks the lady if she will take his hand, and at this time, she understands that it is time for her to establish distance in the relationship between them, because the prince will come of age in 2 years, and it will be troublesome for her if he continues to behave like this. His Majesty reminds him that she promised him they would hold hands when they were alone. The girl agrees, and then they take each other's hands. He tells her to make sure she holds on tightly, so she doesn't get lost, since it's his first time here. The guy claims that he will behave well, and at this time, the girl thought that his palm had become bigger. On the main street, many people traded various goods, and of course, all goods were subject to its tax. Sources of income is actually a mine located near the border. The main character was thinking about whether she should start a water business this year, and the prince asked what she was thinking about. Eloise replies that she is thinking about starting a new business. Upon hearing this, he asks if she is bored, and then says that he is so happy that he can walk with her alone. At this time, the Duchess looked at the guy and did not understand why he made such a face, because he looked like a boyfriend who was upset because the girl was distracted on a date. Ellie doesn't understand what she's thinking about at all, and therefore thinks that she should pull herself together because this is a walk, and she meant that it's more like a walk with her little brother. The girl apologizes and then says that this is the first time he goes outside the castle and asks if she seemed uninterested. The prince informs her that she has been daydreaming all this time and therefore asks her to give him her full attention from now on. His Majesty says that he didn't think that the roads in the north were so wide and didn't even imagine that they would be narrower than in the capital, but it seems he was wrong. The lady explains that they were designed to allow knights to move in an emergency, and at that moment, she thought that she was glad that his memory was slowly returning. The main character believes that lately, the prince has been mentioning the capital more often in passing, and this thought comes to her mind every time she sees him because Kazan has already grown so much, and she is pleased to see that he has become a good guy. Ellie reflected that as long as she stuck to this path, she wouldn't have to experience the same ending as in the novel. His Majesty asks the girl how much she loves the North. She replies that she does, and then thinks that this is a bit odd, because only from her diary entries can she conclude that Eloise loves the North very much. The main character doesn't understand why she decided to rebel in the original story, and believes that the author simply ruined his character. The prince asks the lady if she remembers the time when they met as children. Hearing this, the Duchess, surprised, asks if he remembered everything, and he says that he only remembers the moments associated with her. The young lady doesn't understand what to do, because she knows that Eloise started keeping her diary after she became the Grand Duchess, and she doesn't know anything about that meeting with Kazan. The Duchess says she doesn't remember as it was so long ago that she's not even sure. The boy explains that he asked her if she ever thought about becoming empress, and she replied that she'd think about it when he grew up. His Highness asks if that was her answer, and then reminds him that he asked if she would become empress, and says that the lady then answered him that she would think about it when he became an adult, and today is the very day on which he wants to hear the answer. The lady asks in surprise if he will become empress, and the gentleman asks if she remembers this. The girl screamed and said that she seemed to remember something, and at that moment, she thought that he probably asked this because Eloise could be useful to him, and that was when she was the Duke's daughter. Kazan asks if she has forgotten this conversation, and at that time, the main character looked at him and does not understand what kind of look it was, since she believes that any reader of fantasy novels would recognize it. Ellie believes that these were definitely the eyes of an obsessed protagonist who was overly attached to the main character, and she did not want to believe that the young gentleman had chosen the wrong path of development. The young lady does not understand why he would ask the Grand Duchess of the North to become empress, and therefore assumes that he is trying to irritate her. Kazan says that these men look very much like people from the capital, and asks if she sees the two of them with a cart and flowers. She replies that she does, and the guy says that they have a southern accent, and if that is the case, then they must have come from there. The main character wondered if they were either traveling or sent by Emperor Elysian. Although the latter was more likely, he considered that if they were not ordinary travelers, he asked if they should be killed. Hearing this, the girl was surprised, and the gentleman insisted that it was better to eliminate as quickly as possible what could cause trouble, and at that time, he thought that there were a lot of prying eyes around. The Duchess realizes that she has many people who can take care of this problem, and then says that it has been so long since they spent time together outside the castle, and so suggests that they just enjoy themselves. The lady says she'll ask someone else to take care of them if needed. The young man agrees and says he'll accept whatever she says. Walking down the street, Eloise began to wonder how long it had been since she had rested like this, because it seemed to her like an eternity had passed, and she did not understand why the Grand Duchess of the North had so much work. The main character thought that it was just a cliché to portray the great dukes of the North as cold and harsh, but now that she experienced it herself, of course they were not like that. The girl couldn't understand how with so much work, they could have time to laugh and enjoy life, and suddenly she saw a fortune teller's tent. Kazan looked at her and asked what she was looking at, then asked why she didn't go first. The main character, surprised, asked if she should go alone. The prince says he'll go and buy something. Ellie asks what he needs, since she's curious about what he might need to buy here, since he doesn't need anything. Then he agrees and says she'll be there then. The young gentleman promises to return quickly. Eloise looked after the guy and thought that he was going somewhere without her, and now she understands what it is like to watch her younger brother finally grow out of her care, and knows that of course in 4 years their paths will diverge. The girl doesn't understand why she continues to feel this way these days, and therefore thinks that she needs to pull herself together because she has a lot to do. When the girl went inside, she did not understand what this sweet smell was, and thought that perhaps it was sweet incense. The woman says she was expecting the Grand Duchess of the North. Hearing this, the protagonist, surprised, asks how she knows who she is. At that moment, she thought the cloak was supposed to hide her face, but she recognized her. The young lady assumes that this woman is one of those who knew Eloise before, and the woman says that it looks like she wants to ask her something. Eloise removed her hood, and it is reported that she continued to speak and had the ability to see the future. The witch asks if she is looking for a clue related to the future, and then says that she knows everything and knows the secret of the ability she is looking for. The Duchess is surprised and asks what it is, and the fortune teller says that if she tells, she asks what she will give her in return. The main character says that she is very impudent, and the woman believes that in a deal, it is necessary to pay. The mistress asks her, as she thinks thanks to whom she lives and breathes on this earth, and the sorceress, surprised, asks if she was joking. Eloise pulled out her sword and then put it to the woman's neck and asked if she thought the lady was joking, and then said that even if she finished her off now, no one would blame the lady for it. The main character asks who can condemn her if she takes away the life that existed thanks to her. Hearing this, the woman smiled and then coughed several times and turned into a girl with pink hair. The young lady asks in surprise if she is Mabel and what she is doing there. The pink-haired lady turns to her ladyship and tells her that she is lost and will therefore give her the answer she desires. She then whispers in her ear that the secret she desires to know is what is needed to see the future. The main character remembered that after Eloise became a duchess, there was an attempt on her life, and she suffered greatly, and it seems that then she saw her future. The girl thought that if she needed to see her red liquid, she considered it not such a good ability. The sorceress announced that the prince would soon arrive. Hearing this, the main character realized that she knew Cayenne was in the north. In the book, Mabel was described as a mysterious character, a mage and spellcaster. She maintained neutrality between the prince and Eloise, and may well have served Emperor Elysian, or intended to get closer to him. Ellie wonders how she knew the crown prince was here. At this time, the prince, watching the strangers, thought that they were definitely Elysian's people, and that he probably sent them here after he noticed Eloise's absence at the funeral and at his coronation. Cayenne remembered that Eloise said to leave them, but if he thought about the future, it would be better to finish them off now, and he would have to ask Johan to take care of the bodies. The prince attacked the men and wounded one of them, then said that they almost ruined his date and finished them off. The young gentleman saw that red liquid had spilled on him and thought that he needed to wash it off and return to Eloise clean, as he was thinking that she really liked his face, and of course this was not in a romantic sense. The guy is thinking that she is actually quite boring in this regard, and while walking down the street, he smelled a very strong scent of flowers. The girl who was selling flowers asks him if she can help him, and also asks if he is looking for a gift for his beloved, and then asks about these flowers. The lady explains that this yellow flower is very rare in the north, and that the women there really like it. Hearing this, the guy thinks that Eloise seems to like blonde hair, and so he thinks yellow is a favorite color too. Cayenne says he'll take them, and the girl asks what size bouquet he'd like. At this time, the young gentleman thought that if he wants it to look beautiful, he says that the bigger the better. The prince reflects that this scent should help hide the smell of the red liquid when he returns to Eloise. At this point, the main character, surprised, asks the woman how she knew the crown prince was here. The sorceress replies that she didn't know he was here, but when she arrived, she sensed someone with his aura, which is quite rare. Ellie, surprised, asks if she means the same as the man currently sitting on the throne. Mabel assumes her ladyship is now trying to test her, then assures her that she doesn't want to be her enemy. The Duchess says that she doesn't trust anyone except her people, and the witch asks if she wants to prove that she is one of her people. Ellie believes that if she wanted to be one of them, she would have proven herself by now. The pink-haired lady claims that she will soon prove her loyalty to her, but for now she must disappear before His Highness arrives. The lady thinks she seems to be avoiding Cayenne and asks if there's a reason for that. Hearing this, the girl, surprised, asks if she calls him by his name. At this time, the main character thought that this was true because members of the royal family do not so easily give permission to call themselves by their name, but still he allowed her to use his name when he lost his memory. Eloise thinks this is normal, but understands that others might find it strange. Meanwhile, the sorceress senses the prince's aura approaching and says that he will visit her soon. The Duchess saw that the witch had turned into a bird and was confused about what she was planning, as she wanted to visit her soon. She saw the brooch and thought she must have left it there on purpose. The lady was confused about whether she should take it with her or leave it behind. Suddenly, the girl saw the prince standing with a large bouquet of flowers. He asked her what she thought of it, and also inquired if she liked it. The lady enthusiastically said that the flowers were very beautiful, and so was he. The guy was surprised to hear this, but he didn't hide the fact that he was happy to hear it. Eloise thinks she's really sorry because he looked much more handsome with his platinum hair. The prince asks her if she likes blondes. Meanwhile, the main character thinks about what she means, if she has to express her opinion. It's not that she likes blonde hair, but that she has a soft spot for unrequited male characters, and the golden rule of novels is that they're all blonde. The main character says that it is beautiful and makes him shine like a star. Upon hearing this, the young gentleman was delighted, and then says that her hair is also beautiful because it is dark as night, and her skin is white as day. Ellie asks if he brought this bouquet for her, and then takes it and thanks her. And at this time, she thinks about the fact that she does not understand why he suddenly compliments her hair and why he gives her flowers. Suddenly, the young gentleman sees the brooch and asks in surprise what it is. The lady explains that someone is leaving it for her, and the young man says he has a bad feeling about it and asks why she doesn't throw it away. The girl says that she thinks she should show it to Sher first, because after all, she can't bring some strange thing into her office. The young lady reflects on the fact that she is uneasy about her words, but she understands that the witch will visit her, and therefore she must check everything carefully. Ellie asks if he went to buy flowers for her. He replies that he went because he thinks they are beautiful. The Duchess thought that these flowers were truly wonderful, and that she hadn't even imagined he would give them to her, but when she smelled them, she wondered why they smelled like red liquid. Cayenne looked at the girl and asked what happened. She realized that she couldn't say what was wrong, and then assured him that everything was fine, and thought that maybe she was wrong, because it couldn't be that he would have finished off these people in such a short period of time. Suddenly, a white bird began to chirp, and then sat on the girl's hand, and the prince asked if this was Eloin's bird. Ellie assumes that something must have happened, and that they need to return to the castle as quickly as possible. When the Duchess arrived home, she immediately asked where her brother was, as she had been very worried all this time. The assistant looked at the lady, and she didn't understand what was happening or why he wasn't answering. The maid asks her ladyship what she should do with this bouquet. The mistress tells her to bring a vase of water and leave the bouquet in her study. Drayden informs the lady that Sir Eloin is waiting for her in the office, and then looks in surprise at the maid who brought the flowers. When the main character came to her brother's office, he said that he received this information from the Imperial Palace and showed her the letter. Eloise read the letter and realized that Emperor Elysian was planning to visit the north. She became angry and uttered a curse word. Hearing this, the young gentleman asks what it means because he has never heard this word before, but it seems that it means something rather severe. The young lady claims that it doesn't mean anything, and she just said it to put words together, and at that time, she thought that she screwed up. Eloin asks her sister what she will do. She asks what the likelihood is that information about His Highness has leaked from their side. The young gentleman replies that he would say that it is close to zero, and the lady says that this is not surprising, since her brother got rid of all the spies that they found so far. The young lady looked at her brother and thought that this carefree attitude of his perhaps meant that he was confident that their information had not leaked out. Eloise asks Johann if he took care of the people she mentioned last time. Hearing this, the guy asked in surprise what time she was asking about, and at that time, he thought that she was possibly talking about the day when they went outside the palace with His Highness. Johann tells the lady that he disposed of their bodies at the border. The Duchess considers it certainly quite convenient to dispose of bodies on the server, and then turns to Drayden and asks him to tell her how the Emperor explained his visit to the north. At this time, the main character looked at the young gentleman and thought that she knew this because he reacts to the word Emperor and believes that this must be caused by his desire to take revenge on Elysian for seizing his throne. Eloise believes that, not to mention, that he has a pretty strong desire to always be a winner, which he demonstrated during training with Johann. The Duchess understands that Elysian's visit will certainly fuel Cayenne's desire for revenge and to win back his crown. Ellie ponders whether she should hide Cayenne or take full advantage of the situation. The assistant reports that according to the letter sent by His Majesty, he simply wished to see her in person since a lot of time had passed. Elion thinks that this is a very touching way of presenting complete nonsense. The lady thought that he wanted to see her in person and considered it absurd. Occupying similar positions of power, Elysian and Louise were deeply hostile to each other. However, she could have become Elysian's ally if she had killed Rosanna and betrayed Cayenne. Dryden tells her Grace that he too does not trust the letter, knowing that the Emperor has been constantly pursuing her since she became Grand Duchess. Ellie says that even if this is true, she still doesn't understand how one of His Majesty's loyal subjects could refuse him a visit. The main character says that if they don't open the castle gates for him, it will be considered treason, and therefore she understands that she has no other choice. The gentleman believes that this will help to find out the Emperor's true intentions and protect their crown prince. The Duchess says to open the gates, and at that time, she thinks that she must do everything in her power to protect the North and her people. Eloise turns to Cayenne and says that he can stay in another estate during the Elysian's visit if he wishes, and at that time, she thought that it was very likely that the Emperor would try to finish off the prince if he was seen here. The young lady understands that in this case, the entire North will be accused of treason, and everyone will definitely be executed. Cayenne was surprised to hear this, and then asked if she would like that. She looked at him and realized that this pitiful look was seeking her approval, and perhaps she wouldn't see him again when he regained his memory, which is why it felt so strange and sad to think about it. Ellie says she hopes her choice doesn't disappoint him. The main character thought that everyone would probably be against the Cayenne showing up during the visit, but she understands that on the other hand, nothing motivates her as much as the desire for revenge. Cayenne says he'll meet him, and the girl asks if he's sure about that. The guy insists he's sure because he doesn't want to disappoint her. The Duchess looked at the maids cleaning and thought that the castle had not been so lively for a long time, but she understood that for many years there had been no guests in the North, and especially not their guest, none other than the Emperor himself. The young lady thought that she had a feeling that Mabel's appearance was somehow connected with the Elysian's visit. The girl recalls that the shear said it was nothing more than an ordinary brooch. The young gentleman asks what she's holding, and she replies that it's the brooch she picked up recently. The prince asks if she can give it to him. Ellie asks if he needs it, and then reminds him that last time he told her to throw it away. Cayenne says that he found a use for it, and at that time, the girl thought that it didn't seem like something dangerous, and then gave the thing away. The assistant turns to her ladyship and tells her she should go downstairs. The protagonist reflects on how no noble would dare wear a sword at a meeting with the Emperor, but she understands that the North is a special place where danger lurks around every corner. Eloise saw the carriage in which His Majesty arrived, and realized that she would finally meet his Elysian. The Emperor says that it is rather strange to see her in such a position, and suggests that she rise and drop unnecessary formalities. Elysian turns to the Duchess and says she hasn't seen him in a while. Meanwhile, the main character is thinking how incredibly handsome he is. Ellie says she understands it's too late, and then asks him to accept her congratulations on his coronation. He thinks she should have told him this at the ceremony itself. Elowen reports that as the eldest son of the Wayana house, he was present there and congratulated her on her behalf, and then asks if this is true, and asks her not to take it to heart. The Emperor says he hopes to hear it from her, and then asks if she would like to walk with him. The lady agrees. Elysian informs her that in truth he came to ask her a personal question, and the lady asks him to continue. His Majesty asks if she will agree. The Duchess replies that she will make a decision after she hears what he wants to tell her, and at this time, she does not understand what is happening at all. The Emperor asks if she will become his Empress. The protagonist is surprised to hear this and thinks she just heard a dog barking. Elysian says he doesn't think she's very happy to hear that. The lady counters explaining he misunderstood and that she was simply struck by his hair. His Majesty asks what her answer is. In that case, she says she doesn't understand why he would suggest something like that to her. The gentleman asks in surprise if she understands why, and wonders who else is suitable for the role of his partner besides her. The lady says she hopes he doesn't look at her as just another noblewoman here, and His Majesty claims he wouldn't dare, and if he did, he wouldn't have decided to come all the way north. Eloise says she thought he decided to visit because she never left her castle, but he says he sees she still has the ability to carelessly change the subject. Lady thinks he's flattering her, and says so. The main character thought that apparently, in the novel, Eloise also had to go through something similar, but judging by the fact that she never got married, she managed to cope with it well, and she wonders how Eloise would act in this situation. The Duchess realizes that on the other hand, Elowen warned her about how treacherous the royals could be, and she thinks she now understands what he meant by that. The girl thought that she would not allow Cayenne to grow up like that, because at least she would make sure that he was always honest with her. The emperor asks if she wants to return to the castle, and also asks if she thinks that he could not ask for her hand in front of strangers. Meanwhile, the main character thought that this is why she feels depressed around this man, and believes that he has a frightening ability to know exactly what she is thinking. Elysian asks the Grand Duchess if she thinks his companions have no idea why he is here. Eloise wonders if those people knew then what he was going to propose to her today, and he asks in surprise if she really thought he would come north for no reason. The girl doesn't understand why no one objected to such a ridiculous proposal, but she understands that this only shows that the Elysian's authority is so strong that it can destroy anyone who opposes him. Eloise turns to His Majesty and asks if this is his way of saying that excluding her, he will have control over everyone else, and also wonders if this is how it looks to him. The main character understands that initially, the Grand Duchess must oppose the power of the Emperor in order to balance the power, but right now the North is in a neutral position when there is a possibility that the Crown Prince is still alive. Every step only advanced the Emperor's power. Even so, Eloise could not reveal that Cayenne was here under her protection, simply to undermine Elysian's authority. The Emperor says that he was not trying to show off in front of her, or anything like that, because if he marries her, then all the nobility will definitely express their displeasure, but he has the power to subjugate such opposition. The Duchess says that she would like to know his true intentions, and he says that now she looks more like the Grand Duchess of Vienne that he knows, and what he needs right now is strengthening his sovereign power. Eloise reports that she sees he makes no attempt to hide his intention to take advantage of her. His Majesty says he rather covets the power she wields, and the lady believes he's very frank about it. The Emperor states that she really should think about it, and then asks who would dare to oppose their alliance if they joined forces. The young lady understands that, to be precise, it is more likely that all the power will go to him, because in the end, the power of the imperial family is concentrated around the Emperor, and not the Empress, and then says that she will be honest with His Majesty. The Duchess says that she also likes the power she wields, which is why the role of Empress does not appeal to her at all. The gentleman says that he does not think that this is something that should be said in front of the Emperor, since he believes that she herself is terribly honest. The lady suggests that His Majesty think about it himself, and then says that she can live freely and as she wants in the north, and then asks if he can force her to move to the capital, unless he wants to share the power of the imperial family with his Empress. At this time, the main character thought that she really should watch what she says in front of the Emperor, but she doesn't understand how to be polite to him when he irritates her so much, and therefore she feels worse, because it seems that she is beginning to understand what he is trying to achieve. Ellie understands that he wants to take control of the North into his own hands, but then more importantly, she reveals that she has a personal grudge against him. Hearing this, the gentleman was surprised. The girl asks how he removed her brother from his post. The Emperor says that, firstly, as far as he knows, Eloin never wanted to take that position, and so he simply felt he should be here to assume the reins of power when the Grand Duchess left the North. The young lady reports that he speaks as if he had been considering her to be his Empress for a long time, and then says that she is quite certain that her brother returned to the North only a few weeks after the death of the late Emperor. Elysian says that this is why he likes her, because he thinks she is smart, and then says that if Eloin becomes the Grand Duke, then the other nobility will definitely not be able to capture the North. The Emperor says he senses a very familiar murderous aura nearby. Hearing this, the girl wonders if he's really sensing Cayenne's aura. She wishes he'd stop, but she doesn't understand why men are so emotional. Eloise says that it looks like this is her brother's aura, because if some man behaves like this with his sister, then she asks which brother wouldn't be nervous and would calmly watch this. The Duchess takes the Emperor's hand and says that he must remember something, that he must never touch it without her permission, since now he is not in the capital, but in the North, and if something happens to him, no one will even know about it. Elysian says that this is why he likes her so much, and this is one of the reasons why he wants to get her. At this time, the girl thought that she was not obliged to respond to all his whims, but she understood that he was still the Emperor, and then said that since he said so, she would make him one proposal. The young lady says that to be more precise, her father is missing in action, and the Emperor says that Duke Vian's death was not officially recorded, and then asks how this is connected with her proposal. Ellie says that he is probably aware that, for the wedding of two aristocrats, The consent of all immediate relatives is required, even if it is the wedding of the Grand Duchess. The main character says that if her father agrees to this marriage, then she will think again about his proposal. A few minutes ago, the young gentleman offered to take a walk, and the main character accepted. Meanwhile, Elowen thought something was wrong, as he'd arrived in such a luxurious carriage to pay a visit, and he'd even brought his entourage with him. Elion thought about the rumors that Elysian is looking for an empress, and assumes that he came to offer this place to Eloise, and he knows that behind such a sweet face, there is a cunning and sly man. The Duchess's brother believes that the Emperor is like a snake that waits for the right moment to pounce on its victim and swallow it whole. When the young gentleman heard that the Emperor had offered the Duchess to become his empress, he was very surprised, and thought that this man had simply gone crazy because he did not understand how he dared to covet his sister, and he would have wanted her to never agree. The prince reflects on the need to think rationally, and if you think about it, he has light hair that looks beautiful and shines brightly and is quite tall. He is the emperor. The crown prince recalls the lady's words, that she likes soft, gentle, and sweet people, and that such people suit her taste, and he believes that the external emperor coincides with what she likes, but he understands that he is still not the type of person worth protecting. The gentleman asks the woman if she thinks they are very suitable for each other, even when looking from behind, and the aristocrat thinks that, especially since His Majesty was once a duke, they probably have a lot in common. The gentleman agrees with her because he believes that a person like the Duchess should live in the imperial palace and not in some barren lands. The man tells them to watch their tongues, because this place is the Duchess's territory and not the barren lands, and the aristocrat says that the north is not the best place for women, and then asks if he is right. The gentleman thinks that it's the Duchess first, and then asks how dare he say such a thing. The Marquis says he's very sensitive, and then asserts that every girl dreams of becoming an empress. The prince says that if he says any more stupid things, he will cut out his tongue. The Marquis turns to him and asks what he said, and then screaming says that he is no longer the commander of the Holy Knights because he is not even a duke or an heir, and then asks how he dares to address him like that. Elowen asks what his status has to do with it, and then reminds him that he will cut out his tongue because the Duchess will not even ask him about it. The aristocrat, surprised, says that the Emperor himself is here, and the young gentleman asks if he thinks the Emperor values him more than the Duchess. Hearing this, the man doesn't even know what to say, and Elowen tells him to shut up if he doesn't want to die. The Marquis, leaving, says that he will talk to him again because he remembers it well. The prince, watching them, thought that Elowen himself was dealing with those little idiots, and considered that, at such moments, he was even useful. The man, surprised, asks the woman if she saw that the Emperor had just come, and the Duchess did not even refuse, and therefore believes that this means that she accepted his proposal. Kyan looked at the lady and thought that she didn't even feel his anger, because she considers it a relief, because perhaps it is thanks to the aura of Elowen, and now everything worked out, but she thinks that in the future she should be more careful. The young gentleman understands that if they find out that he is under the protection of Eloise, then she could be in danger, and he began to wonder if he had the strength to protect her, because he understands that he would not have to constantly look around, but he believes that he should still be in his place. The crown prince reflects on how he will behave well in front of the Duchess, and tear to pieces anyone who dares to take the throne from him, no matter who it is. The Emperor asks in surprise if she wants him to find Duke Vaillant, and the lady asks if it is not a fact that the father's consent is necessary. Elysian says that since she doesn't refuse, then this answer will satisfy him for now, and at that time, the girl thought that her father would never show up, and he had an unwavering character. Duke Vaiana possessed amazing abilities. He personally taught Elowen and Eloise how to manage people, which ultimately allowed them to become the commander of the Holy Knights and the Grand Duchess. But most importantly, he was not one of those who would silently watch Eloise's death. The main character reflects on the fact that he never appeared in the book until she died, and suggests that he might appear in the third volume, which she has not read, since there are still 3 years left before the beginning of the book, where Cain became emperor. Eloise says that she feels that the personal conversation has been exhausted, and therefore suggests going inside. The Emperor says that he heard some interesting news, and then says that there are rumors that the younger brother of the former duke has an illegitimate child, and that he will introduce them later. Hearing this, the main character thought that it seemed like he was still afraid of the appearance of an illegitimate child, but his doubts were natural, because on the contrary, it would be strange if he hushed up this matter. Elysian reports that this illegitimate son is currently in the north and asks if that's not surprising. The lady replies that this sort of thing usually happens during times of unrest. The Duchess asks how long he plans to stay here. He says that if she accepted his offer, she planned to stay for a long time, but since this is the situation, Ellie says she understands and says she'll prepare everything necessary for the journey. His Majesty believes that other aristocrats in her place would have asked to stay longer, if only out of politeness. The girl thinks he has a lot to do in the capital and asks if that's true. He says yes and believes nothing could embarrass a lady. The assistant turns to Her Highness and says that he needs to tell her something, and the Emperor says that he will probably go. The Duchess, surprised, asks what happened, and the captain of the knights reports that Lord Eloin is very angry and asks if she sees the Viscount standing there. The assistant says that the Marquise had the imprudence to speak ill of her, and Mr. Ellen became angry with him. The lady asks what the man said, and the assistant explains that he asked if it is every girl's dream to become an empress, and it is even difficult to believe all his words. The main character thought that if Joachim reported to her, it means that her brother is really very angry, and then says that she understood and turns to His Majesty. The Emperor asks, "What is it?" And the Duchess says that she did not refuse his proposal, and then asks if he could listen to one small request. Elysian says that only if he can fulfill it. The woman explains that she is talking about the man sitting at the very end and asking him to give him to her. His Majesty, surprised, says that he doesn't think she needs him, and the lady explains that he insulted her in front of her people and asks if he shouldn't answer for it. The Emperor says that since she did not refuse his offer, he can certainly fulfill such a request, and the girl thanked him and then turns to her brother and tells him to deal with him. This Marquis had a dislike for Eloin, that's why he said so, and with his insults, he most likely wanted to insult all the knights of the north, including Eloin. The Duchess's brother approaches the man and says that he would like to tell him something. The Marquis, surprised, asks what he is going to talk to him about, and the young gentleman thinks that it would be better to quietly leave there, and at that time he thought that it is not for nothing that knights have a high fighting spirit, because they have to spill the red liquid of the enemy. The Emperor says that it is clear from her face that she is bored, and the Duchess says that, to be honest, she was only interested at the moment when her brother left the hall. His Majesty thought she was being very open, and then announced that her brother had returned. At that moment, the girl thought that it seemed he had already dealt with that Marquise. The Duchess says she should have gotten rid of the smell of the red liquid before coming. Eloin apologizes and explains that he didn't want to keep His Majesty waiting. Hearing this, the gentlemen were surprised and thought he had finished off the Marquis. Meanwhile, the main character thought it was funny because they all immediately shook at the words and the red liquid. The Emperor says that since her brother is here, he asks if now is the time to meet that very cousin. At this time, Ellie thought that Kazan would be nervous, but he looks quite calm, but she assumes that maybe he is pretending to be calm. Elysian says that he is officially introducing himself and then objects, and says that it is not worth it since he is an illegitimate child and he does not even know his origin. The Duchess doesn't understand why he brought this up, as she believes that Kazan shouldn't be nervous. If Wayan were here, whether he would accept this illegitimate child. The main character says that she doesn't even know because what's more important is that at the moment she is the head of the Wayana clan. The Emperor believes that he does not even have proof that the blood of the Wayana clan flows in him. Eloise wonders if his black hair and red pupils are direct evidence, as she believes that no one can deny it. His Majesty says that in that case, he will have to prove his relationship himself. The young lady looked at the man and did not understand who this aristocrat was, and assumed that it was impossible that she did not know such an important person who accompanied the Emperor himself. She saw a bottle with a potion, and the Emperor says that in the north, there is a secret with which you can change the color of your hair and eyes, and then asks if this is true, and then says that this is a remedy that can remove the effect of the potion. Elysian says that this is a special drug that neutralizes the effects of other potions, and then asks how about giving it to this young man to drink. The main character asks in surprise if he doubts her words, and His Majesty asks if it's worth sorting this out right now. The girl understands that if she refuses, Elysian will begin to doubt even more, but she assumes that perhaps he just wants to test her. The northern lands are also part of the Empire, which means they are in the hands of the Elysian, and it is quite possible that he knows about the potion and wants to test the main character. The prince does not know what to do, but he believes that if Eloise refuses the Emperor, he will begin to suspect that she is the prince, and even if he does not guess about it, he will still be suspicious of him. The crown prince believes that the emperor is convinced that he is a prince and probably brought poison with him, and that this unknown man could also be Marquis Othan, known for his ability to brew potions. Kazan understands that if this is truly an antidote, then it must be taken into account that they could have changed the face of the Marquis of Othin with the help of a potion, but he knows that they can no longer waste time, otherwise Eloise will find herself in a disadvantageous situation. The young gentleman thought that in this case, it would not matter to him, even if it was poison, and then he said that he would drink it because he believed that it would help his cousin win His Majesty's trust. The crown prince believes that now is not the time for emotions over any title, since he will soon take that place anyway. The guy says that even if he dies, if the Duchess can win his favor, then he asks what could be more joyful, and at that time, he noticed that the emperor was smiling slightly, and others did not know this, but he knew that his look said that he wanted to test him. Kazan believes that Elysian has absolutely nothing to lose in this dispute, and if he really does prepare poison for him, he will turn out to be the real illegitimate child of Duke Vaillant, and the emperor will be able to justify himself in any case. The prince understands that if his face does not change, now his doubts about the north will become a little less. The emperor says that he thinks this is excellent because he hopes that he will prove his loyalty to the Duchess, and then offers to drink it right now. Kazan took the bottle and thought that it was too cold, and that this even made him feel strange, although he understood that in this situation it did not present a problem. The prince thinks about how he will have to pretend to Eloise that he is ill, and then says that he drank everything, and hopes that this will prove his loyalty to the Duchess. The emperor thought that according to Othan, the effect of the magic should disappear as soon as he drinks the potion, and he tested it for effectiveness. It's a bit dubious, but for now it's worth believing. Elysian says it seems the red liquid of the wine cannot be replaced by anything, judging by how confidently he holds himself, and the main character says that as he himself said, it's their family's genes. Ellie doesn't understand why she's worried, but she hopes he doesn't hurt anywhere, and remembers that he was a little unsteady when he left. When the girl entered the prince's room, she saw that he was lying on the bed, and she wondered if it was poison, and then asked the young gentleman if he was okay. The girl realizes that he is too pale, and then asks if the potion has already started to work, and also asks if he is feeling unwell. The prince believes that the potion did not start working now, and asks if she remembers the man who was sitting opposite her. The lady says she's seen him for the first time, and the boy explains that he's Marquis Otieng. Hearing this, the protagonist says she's heard he's very skilled at potion making, but doesn't understand why he changed his face. Ellie says that he is the one who brews potions, and then asks what his words mean, that the potion did not start working right away, and also asks if he felt ill immediately after he drank it. The young lady realized that the eyes and hair color remained the same, and she wondered if it really was poison. Then she said she'd call the Shur because he'd drunk the magic potion, and he'd be able to help him better than a doctor. The prince claims he's fine and then tells her to take it. At this time, the girl saw that this brooch looked familiar, and he explains that this is the brooch that she had, and then asks if it belongs to Mabel, and says that he did not think that she would run into her. Hearing this, the Duchess realized that he knew the witch, and recalled that, according to the plot, they knew each other, but Kazan came to the north at 15 years old, and she became interested in who she really was. Kazan says it's hard to believe, but she's actually a sorceress. Hearing this, the main character doesn't understand why she didn't side with Kazan in the book, believing that if she really is a sorceress, she should have been helping the heir apparent. The boy explains that she imbued the brooch with her power, and thanks to that power, the potion didn't affect him. The girl understands that it was thanks to the brooch that he stayed alive, and believes that this sorceress is very useful in times like these. Ellie recalls that she saw her several times as a child, and she found her very annoying. Kazan pretended not to know what the brooch was, but in fact, he immediately guessed who it belonged to. He just didn't like that it was taking up all of Eloise's attention, and as soon as he heard about the Emperor's visit, he immediately realized Mabel had left the brooch behind on purpose. The main character asks if the brooch can cleanse, since it belongs to a sorceress. He says it's because the vein absorbs poison and rusts from it. The guy says that he told the truth, and he immediately understood what this thing was, but he didn't say anything, fearing that she wouldn't believe him, since many don't believe in the existence of spellcasters. The lady asks how she cannot believe him, and then explains that she was just a little surprised, but by the way he looks unwell, and then asks if he is in a lot of pain. The prince says that he is in pain, but it is bearable, and it seems that the brooch simply neutralized the effect of the potion. The girl asks if he should call a doctor, but he objects and assures that everything is fine, and simply asks to stay close to him, and also asks if she will take his hand. Eloise asks in surprise what he remembered, and Cayenne asks if she will still communicate with him like she does now. The young gentleman says that if she distances herself from him, because his memory has returned, he thinks he will become very sad about it. The Duchess asks if he offers to continue calling him by his first name, and the guy agrees with her, and reminds her that she promised him this even if he remembers. Ellie assures that this is true, but asks if he is really okay, because she thought that he would be uncomfortable, and the prince replies that everything is fine, and on the contrary, he even feels more comfortable this way. The girl says that she will treat him as she does now, and will not distance herself, and he asks if the lady will sit with him until he falls asleep. Hearing this, the Duchess, surprised, asks if he'll fall asleep. Before then, Cayenne explains that he slept well the first day because she was there, and so he thinks he'll recover faster now if she's with him. The next day, the Emperor thought that the goal of coming to the north could be considered half achieved, and the Duchess told him to be careful and left. The Marquis approaches His Majesty and informs him that the Duchess is treating him too carelessly. The Master replies that it's because she is the Grand Duchess, and that it's her special right. The Emperor asks if he knows that she was his bride. The man was surprised to hear this, and then says that this is the first time he hears about this, and there were not even such rumors. Elysian reports that this is not official, and that they were previously betrothed in the palace in childhood, and also suggests that the Duchess does not seem to remember this, but believes that if she had not become a Duchess, it is quite possible that she would now be his wife. The Marquis asks if he was sincere when he proposed, and His Majesty inquires as to how much military force he thinks the Duchess can mobilize. However, he understands that no matter how large, he wonders if those forces compare to the military might of the imperial palace. The Emperor informs that he also cannot ignore the forces that support her, especially at the moment when his nephew has been caught, because the aristocrats believe that now only she can resist him. The Marquis asks about Huayan's illegitimate son, since he heard the knight call him Lord Cayenne, and then asks if it is too suspicious to be a coincidence. An illegitimate son who appeared out of nowhere, and to be honest, it would be better to say that this does not arouse suspicion, but the Emperor believes that in the current situation, it is too dangerous to go against the Duchess. The man asks how it's possible they have the same name. Elysian says he was also surprised when he heard Cayenne's name, but he believes the Duchess isn't the kind of person who would behave so recklessly. The gentleman asks in surprise what he means, and the Emperor explains that if this illegitimate son is his missing nephew, then they would have called him not Cayenne, but another name, since he believes that they would have unfavorable additional suspicions because of the name. The Marquis asks if he really believes that this young man is the illegitimate son of Huayan. His Majesty replies that until the former Duke of Huayan returns, they will not know this. The assistant asks if he will ever return, knowing that 4 years have passed since his disappearance. At this time, the main character thought that maybe she should sprinkle salt, because in any case, they managed to avoid suspicion, but it did not seem that he suspected anything when the prince was called by name. Eloise understands that since Elysian has no doubts, and Cayenne has regained his memory, it's time for them to start gathering the leaders of the Knights' Guilds. The main character is thinking about talking to the prince, because maybe they will be able to find a clue and find out who killed the former emperor. Elysian is the primary suspect, however it's too early to draw conclusions, so she turns to Johann and tells him to gather the guild leaders tonight. The young lady turns to Drayden and tells him to sprinkle salt near the gate because she can't just leave it like that. When Ellie entered the room, the guy looked at her and said that he thought that they would talk alone, but the man said that it seemed that his presence was causing them discomfort. Cayenne says that in such moments, he sees that he's quick-witted and then asks why he constantly interferes in everyday life. He replies that that's precisely why he interferes, because he's quick-witted. At this time, the main character thought that she was very tired, and the young gentleman said that he thought that she was no longer at an age when a brother could interfere in his sister's affairs. Eloise says that he is not the only brother, and then asks how he can say that since she believes that, unlike some, they are connected by ties of aristocratic blood. Cayenne explains that aristocrats don't necessarily have to be related by blood. Meanwhile, the girl thought about how the prince sounded rather brash today and wondered if he was so nervous because of Elysian. Ellie tells her brother to wait for her because she needs to tell him something, and then reports that His Highness has regained his memory. Hearing this, the young gentleman was surprised and said that this was true, and yet as someone wanted. The Duchess thought that maybe it was because of his returned memory, but the prince seemed to have changed slightly, and his expression became more cruel. The lady understands that this will only be to her advantage because one cannot show weakness in front of aristocrats, and she would like him not to look at her like that. The Duchess believes that the most important thing, after he ascends to the throne, is to tame the spirit of the aristocrats, and to achieve this, she must emphasize his tough and cold-blooded image, although in the future, Kazan himself will become like that when he takes up the sword. Louis asks his brother where he's going, and the boy replies that he's tormenting Shira. The girl, surprised, asks why, and then wonders what he's done. Elowen informs that he made a big mistake, and then says that it is time for him to go, and the young lady thought that it looks like the Shire was seriously guilty of something. Kane tells Eloise he's curious about something, and she wants to know what it is. The prince asks if she sees herself marrying her uncle. Hearing this, the main character was surprised, and asked what he was talking about because he thought it was impossible. The girl asks him if she can marry Elysian when she herself promised to put him on the throne. His Highness says that he has blonde hair and she likes it, but at that time, the main character thought that she didn't mean that she only likes blonde hair. The young gentleman claims that he is taller than her, and also taller, and that he is also gentle and caring. Hearing this, the Duchess thought that he still remembered her words, because she knew that this time she simply described the opposite of Kazan. The prince explains that's why he was worried she'd leave him. The lady reveals that just a few years ago, Elysian was a duke, and although he does have imperial blood, he asks if that means she likes men of very high status. The main character thought that she most likely meant that she doesn't like inferior and insecure people, and then says that this is approximately true. His Majesty says that he understands, and asks if this means that only the prince remains. Hearing this, the Duchess does not understand what he means and believes that this cannot be, but if he is 17 years old, then that is the age when he is already interested in the opposite sex. But she understands that now the most important thing is to return the throne, and she cannot be distracted by feelings. Eloise understands that especially when he turns 20, he will go to the capital and meet Rosalind there, and therefore she needs to be very careful for this, and then tells Kazan that now is not the time. His Majesty, surprised, asks why the lady explains that this is possible, even after he ascends the throne. Kazan wonders if this means that after he takes the throne, whoever can do whatever he wants, and at that time, she thought that even the emperor cannot live like that, but he wants to, but he can afford a romantic relationship. The main character reflects on the fact that if only she doesn't interfere between them, as was the case in the plot, then everything will end happily, and then agrees with him and says that he can do whatever he wants. The prince tells her to remember as she promised him. Hearing this, the girl doesn't understand what he's talking about or what exactly she promised, but she believes he needed permission to do things his own way once he takes the throne, since she's something of a mentor to Kazan. Ellie says that he can do whatever he wants, just so that he doesn't become a tyrant. The guy hears this and says that she shouldn't say anything else later. The Duchess agrees with him, and then says that something else is more important now, since yesterday they were unable to talk normally because he was feeling unwell. The lady asks if he has anyone under suspicion regarding the killer of the former emperor, and then says that if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to talk. Kazan didn't think for long, and then took the girl by the hand and said that whoever it was, his decision to become emperor would not change. The main character looked at the guy and thought that this look meant that he had unpleasant memories, and thought that maybe she was too strict since his memory had recently returned. Ellie knows that the main character was not at the crime scene during the murder of the emperor, and then hugs the guy and apologizes. The Duchess says that she thinks she was too impatient, and that for him it is a terrible memory, and then asserts that she will certainly give him back his place, and thought that she does not want him to be sad. When the girl went out into the corridor, she looked at the rusty bird, and thought that it seemed to her that Kazan didn't really like her, but he even told her to throw away the brooch as soon as he found out that it belonged to Mabel. The main character remembered how he asked her if she was going to throw away this brooch, and at that time, she thought that it would not be easy to meet such a bird in the north because its whistle seemed very familiar to her. Suddenly, Ellie saw a pink-haired lady asking how the Duchess was doing. Then she said that if she hadn't pulled that sword, it would have cut off her head. Mabel says that ordinary people who draw their swords at such speeds can't stop as quickly as she does. Then she says she didn't expect her to draw her sword. The main character believes that no one can appear behind her back without her knowledge unless it is a killer. The lady with pink hair asks if she can prove herself with this, and at that time, the young lady saw that the brooch in her hand had disappeared and thought that it was true that this witch wanted to help her and Kayan, that she was throwing something like this before leaving. The Duchess says the spell seems to have the ability to foresee the future, then asks if that's true. The pink-haired lady replies that it does, but not to the point where it can read her thoughts. Ellie realizes that it is true that she was able to escape danger thanks to Mabel's pin, but she wonders if she can really believe in Mabel. The main character reminds the sorceress that she said she would become her human. She says that's true, and the mistress asks if she meant her, and not His Majesty Kayan. Eloise reports that the man to whom she was supposed to show her devotion as a divine beast was not the direct heir to the empire, and asks if this is so. Then she asserts that this is how it should be. Mabel says his throne hasn't been taken away yet, and asks if that's true. The Duchess asks what she means, and the girl explains that what she worships isn't the direct heir. The sorceress states that she only acts when the throne is unstable, and her instinct tells her that the throne is in danger. The lady with pink hair reports that the owner of the throne is in danger, and she can't do anything alone, and therefore she can only follow others, in short to create a king, and this person is the Grand Duchess Eloise Vaiana. A few days later, the woman thought that this day had finally come, and she would no longer be able to return, and then she opened the door and entered the room. The Duchess understands that the moment she makes an announcement to everyone, all her decisions will affect their lives. The girl understands that although Kayan is the direct crown prince, she then announces that she wants to take the throne. Ellie asks her brother if he leaked the information, and he says that he did what she asked, and then says that this is her first visit to the territory in 4 years. At this time, the main character thought that after reincarnation, this was her first visit, and said that she was curious how many people would come. Elowen asks if everything is okay with her, and she asks if he still sees her as a duchess, and then says that if she can't handle this herself, she won't dare to live up to the great imperial title. The brother assures that this is not true, and then says that when she was a duchess, assassins were already targeting her, and this is what worries him. At this time, the girl thought that she had no idea how the sons and daughters of other nobles, but Eloise and Elowen lived under the threat of murder. The lady believes that the main reason must be that the Duke of Vaillant spoiled his wife so much that he did not find a new one. Ellie thanks him for worrying about her, and then assures him that everything will be fine because she is going with Yochim, and Kayan is also with her. The main character thought that if he saw how skilled Kayan was in killing magical beasts, then he probably would not hesitate to finish them off one by one. The lady states that it's obvious that Kayan will die at her hands before he can intervene. Hearing this, the boy says that if she drags him north, he can personally torture him for her. The Duchess says she'll think about it, and he asks if it wouldn't be better to go with him than with His Majesty. After all, Wyan's bloodline protects the city far better. The sister wishes him a good journey and to take care of His Majesty, as she will be worried about them. The lady informs that she will return in 3 days if nothing unexpected happens, as she only wants to meet the Count and cannot wait. Ellie knows she's a little nervous, but she's interested not only because it's her first time going to another estate, and not to mention that this will be the first time Kayan will be introduced to nobles outside the castle, and she thinks it will be a good experience for him, and a chance to learn how to subjugate nobles. The Duchess turns to the Kayan and says that she is sure that everything will go smoothly, but in case of sudden danger, he should constantly monitor his surroundings, especially when entering the estate of any nobleman. The guy asks in surprise what she means by danger, and the girl explains that not everyone will be happy with his visit. His Majesty asks if this danger is in any way connected with what she ordered Eloina to do. At this time, the main character thought about what she told her brother to do, to leak information about her leaving her castle, and believes that she could really get into trouble because of this. The girl understands that in the end, in this way, she will take care of the nobles around her as soon as they find out. Ellie agrees with him and says that she didn't expect him to grasp everything on the fly, and then reports that she intentionally leaked information about her movements. The guy asks in surprise why, because he thinks she is putting herself in danger and knows that there will probably be a lot of killers who want to finish off the Grand Duchess outside of her castle. The Duchess says that she hopes for this, and then says that if they now take care of the nobles who might rebel against her, This will prevent all possible dangers when he ascends the throne. Cayenne agrees with her, and then says that he doesn't want her to put herself in danger because of him. The prince says that if he asks her not to do this again, it might seem like he is ordering her, so he won't, and then he says that instead, he will kill with his own hands anyone who tries to harm her. At this time, the main character thought that he was presenting his words as if he wanted to protect the one who was dear to him, but he was probably saying this because he needed her, and if so, it wasn't so bad. And then he said that he could do as he wished. The guy says he has no reason to grant a merciful death to those who oppose her and are interested in untruth. The lady again agrees with him. A woman with silver hair greets the Duchess. Ellie tells Countess Roxana that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The lady reports that she heard that the lady was busy destroying demonic creatures. The Duchess says that she was busy, but now everything is fine, and no matter how busy she is, she must go out in public from time to time, because the last time was 4 years ago. Roxanne looked at the guy and thought that it must be him, and then suggested continuing inside. The Countess reports that she ordered the servant to take care of the knights who accompany her, because in any case 4 years have passed since his last inspection of the lands, and she understands that this is indeed a very long time ago. Ellie says that it's just time to fully take on the responsibility as the Grand Duchess, and then asks if she understands it yet. The lady asks if she means that the illegitimate son of the House of Wyan is actually the Crown Prince, and then says that she doubts that there is a single person who knows the House of Wyan better than she does. Countess Roxana was practically the only noblewoman who was close to both Eloise's father and her mother. Roxana knows how impossible it is that there is an illegitimate child in the Wyan house. The protagonist realizes that in the novel, the Countess never betrayed Eloise, and after the untimely death of Eloise's mother, Roxana became her godmother long ago. The lady was cruelly tried for helping Eloise in the uprising, but she never said a single word that could put her goddaughter at risk. The Countess knelt and greeted His Royal Highness. He said that was enough, and she could rise. At this time, the Duchess thought that Cayenne was commanding her completely naturally, and if you think about it, he never had problems in dealing with those who were below him in status, despite the lack of memory. Ellie believes that in the future, he will become a wonderful emperor, and she is so proud of him, and then turns to Roxanne and says that she is sure that she already knows the reason why she visited her before anyone else. The Countess assures her that no matter what, she will always be on her side. Ellie says she's grateful for this, but wants to show His Highness something. The woman asks if she means how to deal with nobles, and the girl says that as expected, she knows her very well. Roxana says that it's timely, and there is one Viscount who has been causing a lot of trouble lately. The lady reports that he's suddenly tripled the tax hearing. The lady can't understand how he could raise the tax without her knowledge, and thinks she's been overly lenient. Eloise says this Viscount will be a fine example. Her godmother says she's prepared something just in case, and with her permission will go to her study and fetch it. The Duchess tells the prince that she will now teach him how to put nobles in their place. He surprised asks if she can't just kill him. The main character objects and says that this cannot be done, and he asks surprised why the lady explains that even if they are just pretending to be vassals, they are still her people, and therefore cannot be killed so easily. Cayenne wonders if he can then finish off those who don't even pretend to support him. At this time, Ellie thought that he probably wants to ask what to do with the traitors, since he believes that forgiving traitors is the worst option, and it would be problematic if someone came to the side of the Elysian with his. The Duchess informs him that he needs irrefutable proof of their disloyalty, and this is necessary for the other vassals to agree to the punishment. He agrees and says he will take this into consideration. The lady turns to the Grand Duchess and informs her that she has brought information about the vassals at her request. Eloise says she should have prepared them herself, but forced her to do all the work for her. The Countess asks her not to say this, as she believes it's practically impossible to govern such a vast north alone. Roxana explains that this is why she has vassals like herself. Hearing this, the lady thinks she's right. The more vassals she has, the less work she has. The Countess turns to His Royal Highness and asks if there is anything he wants, and then says that there is no one more capable of helping him achieve his goal. The lady says she hopes he will remember the Duchess's help, even in the distant future. Hearing this, Eloise turns to the lady, and the prince assures her that everything is fine, because after all, she says the right things. Roxanne says that it seems her words were too frank, since the Duchess is like a daughter to her, and asks her to simply take them as the delirium of an old caring godmother. Cayenne asks in surprise if she is Eloise's godmother. The lady says that she became her godmother as soon as her mother passed away when she was very young. At this time, the main character thought that when Eloise became the Grand Duchess, their relationship became like that of an ordinary lord and vassal. But even so, Roxanne still treats her like a daughter, and therefore believes that she did what she should not have done. The Countess says that this is not official, but during the period of the Duchess's grief for her mother, she told her to call her godmother. The prince assures her that she will never have to worry about Eloise because of him. At the estate of Viscount Hashem the following afternoon, he asks the Grand Duchess why she has honored him with her visit. The main character explains that she heard a strange rumor, and apparently one of her vassals raised his tax, and then asks what he thinks about it. Kasheman assures that he knows nothing, and the lady asks if he claims that Countess Roxana is lying. The vassal says that Countess Roxana would never lie to her because, according to him, she is a very gentle and kind woman. Ellie thought that among other nobles, her godmother was known for her cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness, and therefore she was sure that the Viscount knew that if Roxanne found out about what he said, she would immediately rush at him with a sword at the ready, given her character. The Viscount falls to his knees and begs for forgiveness, and then says that if he is forgiven just once, he swears his loyalty until the end of his days. The Duchess says that this is wonderful, and she will forgive him just this once because, after all, she cannot help but take into account his long-standing achievements with her father. Hearing this, the prince, surprised, asks the lady if she is really going to forgive him. The man thanks her, and Eloise says that only if he agrees to cut the tax to a third of what it is now for the entire next year. The lady explains that by now she means the amount that was supposed to be, and was, before he raised it. Hearing this, the Viscount asks for forgiveness and begs the Duchess to be reasonable, since he believes that it is impossible to manage the land with such a low tax. Eloise says that she is sure that the triple tax has become a similar burden for the people on his land, and since he has tripled the amount she asks, whether it would not be fair to also reduce it by a third. The man says that he has to pay her taxes, and she asks where he will spend the money he receives from people, and then asks if he is now worried about paying her. The assistant asks the lady whether to cut off his head, and she tells him to wait, and then turns to the Viscount and says that if you think about it, his youngest daughter is getting married soon, and thinks it would be funny to strip him of his title right before her marriage. Hearing this, the Viscount became frightened and asked the Grand Duchess to show mercy at least to his daughter. The lady asks him how he feels about tripling the tax he pays her. The man says he will do as she commands and cut the citizens' taxes by a third. Hearing this, the Duchess turns to Kyan and asks if he sees that it is not difficult to tame the nobleman, and all he needs to do is to press on his weakness. At this time, the main character thought that she was ready to hide the weaknesses of those who were loyal to her, but when it came to the unfaithful, she used their weaknesses against them without hesitation for a second. A few minutes later, the Viscount informs the Duchess that he has signed the contract, and the lady asks if he knows what will happen if he breaks his word, and then leaves. Ellie thought about how she had told Cayenne and Yokoyam to return so she could go to Roxanne's estate right now. Walking down the hallway, the girl realized she was being followed. The stranger watching her wondered if it was the woman, and if the rumors of her beauty were true. However, he realized he had to finish her off with his own hands, believing it to be a pity. The mercenary understands that the mistress is faster than he thought, but he believes that he cannot lose her, and therefore quickly goes after her. When the guy entered the other room, he saw that it was empty and the lady was not there, and then he asked in surprise where she had disappeared to, since he had been following her closely. Suddenly, the mercenary saw a dagger in front of his eyes, and the Duchess greeted him. The lady asks if it's hard to die right away, and so suggests he enjoy the pain to his heart's content, and then die. He asks surprised what's wrong. Ellie says that no matter how much she looks at him, he doesn't look like the ordinary servant who works here. The guy says he's a gardener. Hearing this, the girl thought that this was a ridiculous excuse, because she understood that what kind of gardener would use a sword, and then asked if he knew what her servants learned first. The main character tells him to never follow the Duchess secretly, and if he is waiting for his friends, then he better stop waiting for them. The guy asks fearfully what she means, and the lady replies that it will be difficult for them to survive and therefore suggests that he stop talking about nonsense, and then asks who told him to do this. Cayenne looked at the bound mercenary and then asked Joachim what Eloise does in situations like this. He replied that she usually deals with the attackers after she figures out who's behind them, and then asked if he had another solution. The assistant reports that her life was threatened many times in the palace, and he cannot do this now because he knows that the person will say anything under the torment of pain. The prince says that Yeloise would not like it if he got in the way, and then asks if that is true. Yochayim says that he is sure that she would praise him, because she is the only one who defends the north and recognizes that he is capable of doing such basic things. Cayenne thought that it would be right to make a decision after seeing Eloise's reaction. The main character looked at the mercenary and thought that he looked like a hired killer, and if he were loyal to the one he serves, he would have killed her immediately before he was captured. The Duchess reflects that he is not bad, but remains silent despite the fact that his arms are possibly broken. The mercenary asks why they don't ask anything, and upon hearing this, the lady asks how dare he tell her this, and then says that first she must cut out his tongue. The prince turns to the lady, and she says that he smells of red liquid, and asks if he is hurt. He says that everything is fine, and that he and Joachim did something, and then he touches the tree and asks if she is disappointed. Ellie assures him that everything is fine, and then says he's a good boy. Hearing this, the young gentleman asks, surprised if she's disappointed that he didn't behave well. She assures him that she's definitely not. The girl tells the guy that he needs to be nice only to her, and at that time, she thought that he needs to be a good boy only for her, and she knows that she said that, and it sounds somehow strange. The assistant informs her ladyship that they have captured them all. She asks how many there were. Yochayim says there were only 2, and they finished them off. Hearing this, the mercenary, surprised, asks if they killed his comrades. Cayenne asks if they were all following the orders of one person, and the assistant says that it seems like they were sent by one person. The main character grabbed the mercenary by the hair and asked who gave the orders. He replied that it was Baron Asman. The Duchess says that if he wanted to finish her off so much, he doesn't understand why he sent such weaklings, since he believes that she deserves to have at least an archmage as her opponent. Eloise thinks that people are starting to underestimate her because she hasn't left the castle for so long, and then turns to Johann and says that he can do whatever he wants with him. Mercenary of Scrivia says that she is late, and then claims that now she knows who gave the orders. The Duchess says that she is not so kind as to feel sorry for the mercenary who came to finish her off. The assistant turns to Her Royal Highness and suggests that he watch carefully, and the lady says that he must learn to order others to do his dirty work for him. Joachim plunged the mercenary into eternal sleep, and the Duchess thought that she should order the Viscount to get rid of the body. The prince says that he himself wanted to finish him off, and then turns to the lady and reminds her that she said that he could finish off anyone who threatens her. Eloise explains that she is simply teaching him for the future when he takes the throne, because she knows that the time will surely come when his subordinates will have to get their hands dirty for him. Cayenne agrees with her and says that next time, she should let him take care of them himself. Roxanne asks how Viscount Heshemain reacted. The lady replies that he insisted the information was false. Hearing this, the Countess smiled and said that she believed that he would have to be sent to the grave at their next meeting, since she believed that he had already lived too long. Ellie says he turned so pale when she said the information came from her. Hearing this, the woman asks if that means he's still afraid of her. The main character thought that the subjects would soon learn about how Viscount Heshemain treated the bodies of the mercenaries, and believed that this would be a silent warning, that the same fate would befall them if they ever disobeyed her. The Countess says that His Royal Highness seems gentler than she remembers him, and then asks if the girl calls His Royal Highness by his first name. At this time, Ellie reflects on the fact that the prince seems softer, and believes that he behaves much better than in the original novel. Roxanne turns to her ladyship and says that she may consider this to be an elderly woman's concern, but she thinks she should be careful. Eloise says that she knows this, and when he gets the throne, everyone will start hunting for her. The Grand Duchess will swear support to the Emperor, and she will become the most influential after the Emperor himself. In fact, until the Emperor gains complete control over the imperial court, the Grand Duchess may even be more influential than him. The young lady understands that no matter what, the most important thing for her now is to make Cayenne emperor, and as long as she remains on good terms with him, she is sure that they will never become enemies. The godmother says that this is not what she was worried about. Upon hearing this, the girl asks in surprise if she did not want her to be wary of the fact that His Royal Majesty might try to subjugate the North in the future. Roxanne says that although she has not taken his side before she knows this for sure, and then says that His Royal Majesty can be a cunning stepfather when it comes to coming up with a plan to get what he wants. At this time, the main character thought that when she remembers what Kazan was like in the novel, what she says does not seem so strange, and then asks what she will try to tell her then. The woman reports that older people tend to notice certain things better, and she wants to say that when it comes to her, His Royal Highness seems to. Suddenly, a knight enters the room and screaming addresses her grace and reports that demonic beasts have suddenly gone wild in the northern forest. Eloise, she quickly mounted her horse and thought that it was good that Roxanne's estate was close to her castle, but what was more important was that she didn't have to worry about Eloin staying behind to defend the castle again. The main character understands that she still can't relax, and the assistant turns to her ladyship and says that it seems the forest has become dangerous. Drayden says that the demonic beasts went berserk 3 hours ago, but now they have calmed down a bit, and the lady says that she is heading there immediately. Ellie looked at the servant and asked if the boundary stone was broken, and he said that it was not quite so, and at that time she looked at the master and thought that he had black hair, and that this was a distinctive feature of the Wyan house. The man says that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and the girl asks in surprise if he is the father, and at that time she became interested, since it was not said that the Duke of Vayan died, but she considered the possibility that he was still alive. The young lady didn't understand why he had to show up now. The father approached the girl and then hugged her. The main character thought that this was actually not so bad, and it was probably because he was her father. The gentleman asks how she is doing, and Ellie says that she thinks she should ask him about it. The father replies that he is doing well, and her brother said that she is now the Grand Duchess. Ellie says she sees that he's already met with Eloin, and then asks why he didn't come here with him. He replies that his son is currently working on demonic beasts. The young lady says that she understood, because he left him to take care of the rest, and came first. He says that this is true, and then informs her that one very annoying comrade is trying to pursue him to the end, but Eloin will take care of everything, and tells her not to worry. The gentleman says that he also sees that his new nephew is also here. Kazan says it's an honor to meet him, uncle. At this time, the main character thought that he must have immediately guessed who Kazan was, but did not understand why he called him nephew, and the prince immediately called his father uncle, and these two are simply amazing. The man says that it seems a lot has happened in his absence, and the girl says that he was gone for 4 years, and during that time, an entire mountain range could change in the north. The lady turns to Anna and orders her father to be taken to his room. The man says he doesn't think he's old enough to forget where his own room is. Ellie informs him that his old room has long since become hers. Hearing this, her father smiles and says it's understandable, since she is after all the Grand Duchess. The daughter says that she would like to hear what happened to him during all this time, but first suggests that he rest, since she thinks that he probably could not take care of his health until this moment, and she will order the cooks to prepare something special for him. The father thanks her, and then says that they still have a lot to discuss, because he missed them, and then he walked up to the girl and hugged her. Eloise turns to the prince and says that he did well, and thinks that he was probably surprised by her father's sudden return, but he was able to remain calm. Kazan says that since he did so well, he offers to praise him again. The girl says that he called him uncle without even thinking and thinks it was a great job, and that he didn't lose his cool in his presence. The guy explains that he didn't want to seem scared, because after all, he is the crown prince, and shouldn't hesitate in front of the nobility. Besides, he needed to impress her father. In the evening when the girl saw her father, she said that now he looked like a nobleman, and he said that he was glad to hear it. At this time, the main character thought that she first needed to discuss a more important topic, and then asked where he had been all this time. Father says that before that, he thinks he should find out why the crown prince is now in the north. Kazan turns to Mr. Wayan and says that he will answer this question and tell why specifically here. The gentleman says that he understood, and this means that the previous emperor was killed and he fled to the north, and then says that if they both decided to do so, they would follow his example. At this time, the young lady thought that he didn't seem angry at all about his daughter receiving his title when his death hadn't even been confirmed. Ellie reflects on the fact that, on the other hand, someone must always rule over the north, and then says that now it is their turn to listen to his father's story, and asks what he has been busy with for so long and has only returned now. The main character understands that if the emperor finds out about the return of the former duke, he must ask him for his daughter's hand in marriage, and she does not want this to happen. The father explains that he went out to find it, and that it's a gift for his daughter, and in his hand he holds something that looks like an egg. He explains that it's a gift for her coming of age, and to be precise, although he didn't think it would take so long. The gentleman explains that he thought it would take about 2 years to get his daughter's coming-of-age gift, so he went to the border to find it. Ellie asks if this means he's been on the border for the last few years, and then asks how valuable this thing is. The father explains that this is the egg of a demonic beast, but at this time, the girl does not understand why he is so proud of himself, and more importantly, that it is normal for such an egg to be located far from the border. Father says that it was supposed that he would give it to her when she came of age, but some unforeseen circumstances got in the way. Ellie asks how old she was when she told him she wanted such an egg. He replies that she was about 8 years old and that she was still little, and then asks his daughter if she knows the value of this gift. The main character heard this and was surprised and thought that he was a complete idiot who was ready to do anything for his daughter.